dreams for us to see, but this one here is mine. I hope that you're happy, I hope that you're well. Now come on and join me, watch the world go to hell as we are screaming away. We're streaming today. Let's stream today. Hey Crouching, how you doing today? Yeah, Katie Campbell was a really nice interview. Really nice to talk to her. Get her perspective of things. If you guys haven't seen, I've just uploaded the interview with Katie Campbell, and good luck to her as she's out in Halifax. I think she has a very realistic view as to what's going on, but also delivers a very hopeful message that that she is saying that her experience with going door to door and talking to people is that they're being very, they're listening to her. That she's talking about communism and she's not getting the big pushbacks that you would expect from people in regards to communism. Like she says, sure, every so often you get somebody, but it's always someone in the older demographic and it's always someone who's kind of, bought into the Kool-Aid. But she says of people who are under the age of 35, her experience is that everyone is listening and paying attention, and and Crouching, you're doing that thing that everyone who drinks says. I really regret getting drunk last night, never doing that again. Oh, sure, bud. cut to later on this evening. Live and let die, Crouch. Hey, Matthias, how you doing, bud? Yeah, Matthias, you could back me up on this for sure. I feel like everybody does this at some point in their life, right? They drink so much, and the next day they're just like, I'm never drinking again. And then literally, like, the next week. I feel like that's just part of being a human being, right? We just don't know how to stop that kind of shit. We're just like that. I know for myself, like to take a little bit more of a serious turn. Well, it's Friday evening after all, isn't it, Matthias? I've managed to get my drinking down to once a week, and I've managed to get it down to just like a couple of drinks, and I'm quite proud of that for myself personally, because I can see, especially as I'm getting older, right? Especially as I'm getting older, and especially as I'm seeing, the whole place go completely to hell. I think that people, myself included, use alcohol as a way to medicate, as a way to kind of, and the way that I've come to articulate it is that you have the left brain, right brain, right? Everybody has the left brain, right brain kind of thing going on, and I forget which one is responsible for which, but one side of the brain is responsible for you being a monkey, basically. You're a monkey, you're living in the world, you're a monkey interacting with the world, right? And then the other side of the brain is more interested in the meta stuff. So, like, what are you in the world, right? So, one is concerned with immediate threats that are directly in front of you, or immediate concerns that are directly in front of you. And the other is concerned more about you existing in the world and in the society and in that kind of situation, right? And I think that alcohol, the reason why we drink alcohol, is because it shuts the meta one up. It brings the meta side of the brain down to the monkey's level. So the two can actually kind of have a conversation with one another on equal terms to a degree, right? Where the monkey's not that affected by the alcohol. It's the meta side. And so the monkey can sort of take over for a minute and can kind of be like, we can finally talk, you and I. That's at least my experience of it. But anyway. Yeah, didn't Mr. French shock you with that social housing bit? It did. It shocked me that social housing got mentioned at all on the debate stage, actually. And it's one of those reasons why people say to me, I see it all the time where people are like, well, why are these guys even on the debate stage? Why is somebody like Blanchet even on the debate stage? He's not really consequential to the larger English debate. But I think it's good to have those sort of disparate voices, much how I feel like it's good to have the Green Party on the stage, so that those ideas can be heard on the national level, right? Like that those sorts of ideas, it'd be much easier for like a conservative liberal alliance along with the NDP to sort of just push things aside. But if you have somebody on the debate stage who's willing to defend those issues and willing to bring them up, well, that can penetrate into the consciousness of the people, right? True, I smoke weed sometimes right after work. Sometimes you just have to. Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right? I really liked how well it was moderated. You have to give the participants discredit for keeping it. Yeah, I actually was pretty impressed by the quality of the questions. There wasn't much by way of foreign policy. Like, in retrospect, I kind of look back on it and I go like, oh yeah, they like literally didn't talk about foreign policy really at all. The only person who brought up anything in terms of foreign policy was O'Toole with his usual bullshit grifting, like, oh, the Uyghur genocide and all China, we got all China, right? It's just a way to sort of get anti-Chinese propaganda into the debate. Yes, let's move on. So we got an 8 already picked from Crouching. I'm thinking a 5. I'm feeling a 5. That's how I'm feeling. I like Paul.
Here we
generally.
go for today's number.
I think that she's good.
It's
I think
September
she's a good person.
10, 2021.
You got to come in.
10 balls. Each ball has a number. Numbers 1 through 10.
Here we go. What's it going to be? Are we going to have some
Swirl
magic?
the numbers.
Feel some magic today?
Pick a number. Today's number is 4.
I was 1 off. Come on. It's got to count for something, right? Being 1 off. And Crouching, you know what? Half of 4 is 8, right? So let's say that you just won. Why not? Dun, 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 dun. And yes, Annemie Paul is a good she's a good person, and she's a good. I've talked to her, and it seems to me like she's genuine. It's just in the end she's a neoliberal, right? And she's on the wrong side of a couple of issues, like especially once you start diving into the foreign policy stuff. Like she's on the wrong side of the issue in regards to the Israel-Palestine conversation, right? Like she's on the wrong side of an issue like that, and so. I feel like this is just the neoliberal kind of infection that's going along. Yeah, I want to like Justin. I wanted to like Obama. It's sad when people you look up to let you down. Yeah, and I mean Justin Trudeau has ended up being, just like Obama in regards to that. They're both something of a disappointment, right? Like that we had big high hopes for Obama, and Obama really like mattered on a cultural level. I think. That it did matter for Americans to elect a black president. I think that was a big cultural moment for America, and that could never be taken away. But in terms of like how he legislated and how he ran the place, I mean, one of the big things that you can walk away from the Obama administration is that when he was elected, he got elected with the full force of the Senate and the House. There was absolutely no gray area whatsoever. The Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency clearly. And they had like filibuster-proof supermajorities and shit like this. Like they were in power. And what did they get done? Nothing. Nothing consequential that mattered to the populace, right? They really just kowtowed to the military-industrial complex. I mean, Obama drops more bombs than Bush did. Obama expands the wars from 2 to 7, right? Like, by any metric you want to use, Obama uses his power to just expand the war effort, right? Like, he's very much an insider. And yeah, they aren't brave enough to do the right thing and stand up to the oligarch. Well, and I mean, I feel like we saw in that debate, we really saw something of Trudeau that people have kind of talked about, but they don't really, we don't really get to see that often, honestly, which is that Trudeau's kind of a bratty kid, right? Like he seemed very disingenuous on that stage, honestly. Like when I was watching him, the whole time I was like, this is just a performance. Like, he is just performing. And you can really see how he would go behind the scenes afterwards and like complain about it, right? And you know, that classic like, my fellow Americans, I'm here today to say to you X, Y, and Z, and then the doors close and they're like, I'm gonna go bomb some, right? And like how there's a duality to being a politician and being a person, right? That politicians rarely show you who they actually are. And on that debate stage, like, Justin Trudeau looked fake. Like, yeah, exactly. After every answer, he had that fake kind of smile, right? Like, and it does seem as though what I am seeing in terms of the, like, you got the fact-checking the federal leaders debate and all of this. The big moment, in my view, where the reconciliation, where Jagmeet Singh says, you can't take a knee one day and you're going to take Indigenous courts the next. Even the fact-checkers are like, well, yeah, in June, a spokesperson for Indigenous Service Ministers, Mark Miller, said the federal government wants to compensate Indigenous children, but has challenged the jurisdiction of a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal order. So they are taking them, right? And so Trudeau saying that that's not the case, well, that's a pretty bald-faced lie, right? Like, it's pretty straightforward. And the CBC, of course, reporting on it in the most soft way possible. But nobody's walking away from this debate believing that Trudeau won. It's really reflecting. Like, we're yet to get the actual change from what the debate actually did. But I'm not going to be too surprised to see these numbers kind of just keep moving forward. That this is what it's going to look like, mainly. Yeah, and yeah, he did look like a snappy little child, right? Like, he just kind of did have this kind of, like, snippy way about him. And when, like, who was being the most snippy the entire time? It was Trudeau, right? Like, that, the critiques, it felt like whenever anyone was critiquing Trudeau, the critiques were well-founded, but the snipes that Trudeau was coming back with weren't equally well-grounded, right? like when he went at Annamie Paul, what did he say? He said, I am not going to take caucus advice from you, right? It was like, come on, man. Like, that's kind of just bitchy, right? That's kind of bitchy, right? Oh, yeah, the power of a well-moderated debate. Exactly. So, of course, as they are fact-checking, they are, like, O'Toole is trying to convince a gullible populace that he is completely, he is not going to privatize the healthcare system. And it's like, he keeps saying that he's going to let the provinces decide, right? Oh, the provinces can do it. And it's like, well, what do you think, like, Ford and Kenny are going to do? Like, what do you think is going to happen? And so O'Toole is 100% on the course to privatize the healthcare system. Like, that's his objective. It's very, very clear that they want to do this. Like, what do you think they're talking about when they're talking about balancing the budget? What do you think they're talking about when they're talking about getting rid of deficit spending? Like, what do you think they're talking about when they're talking about, like, oh, let's empower the provinces, the conservative-run provinces, to let them do what they would like to do? When, oh, we'll increase spending. We'll increase the amount of spending we put into the privatized systems, of course. Yeah, we would absolutely love it if the public continued to pay for privatized systems. That would absolutely be the case. The PPC, I feel like if Bernier gets his seat, that's a massive, massive, massive disaster for the Liberals. That, like, the number one thing that I think people are taking away from that debate is it is more concrete now in people's minds that this election is superfluous, right? That this election could have waited, that it is an early election. Even Trudeau is saying, like, oh, this is a difficult time, the pandemic's a difficult sort of situation. And the other leaders are just like, well, then why would you call the election, right? Jugmeat's singing, John? Okay, cool. Hold on, one thing I want to take a look at is how many seats does each party have in Canada? This is going to be a good... let's take a quick look, just to be 100%. So as it stands right now, like, you're looking at a pretty major disaster for the Liberals, right? Like, the Liberals would go down, they're at 155 right now, losing power in the House. Basically, the Conservatives are the big winners, but so are the NDP. That both the NDP and the Conservatives gain approximately 10 to 15 seats each. That the Bloc Québécois is actually poised to lose a great deal. Which is interesting, because I actually rather liked Blanchet on the stage, I have to say. Right? 32 seats down to 25. But, there is something that occurs in Quebec, which is that while people while Quebecers are interested in the separatist movement, and while they're interested in, leadership for Quebec, I do think that they understand that, the Bloc Québécois doesn't necessarily get stuff done for them, that it is like, it's almost like a protest vote to an extent. Looks like the Willy Wonka ads worked. You know what, man? The Willy Wonka ad completely worked. It was completely successful. I had a great conversation with my brother a few days after that was released, and we had a good laugh about it. But then he said to me, and if you don't know, my brother has been in the NDP in Manitoba for his whole life, basically, and has been working for them. I'm convinced he's going to be the premier one day. But, he just needs to believe in himself. But and he pointed it out. He said, yeah, sure, it was silly and it was stupid and it was dumb and it kind of made the Conservatives look a little goofy and all that kind of stuff. It completely worked. It was completely effective. That it really immediately got everybody talking about the reality that the Liberals were only calling this election in order to seize their majority. And it does seem like the populace, who was kind of begrudgingly going like, I guess an election, all that kind of stuff, it did galvanize that uncertainty and turn it into a kind of begrudging, a grudge, right? And that grudge seems to have followed through, and it seems as though, as I've said in the past, right? Like, if minority governments collapse, or if elections are called early, the party who gets the blame for why this is called early is typically the one who eats it. And in this particular case, it looks like the populace has decided that the person, that the group who's going to eat it is going to be the Liberals. So it's going to cost them over 10 seats if things continue on this front. It's looking as though the idea that there's going to be a Conservative majority, like, that's off the table now. So and this really speaks to the like really massive dysfunction that's going on in the country, that the country doesn't really know where it wants to go. It doesn't have like a clear, there is no leader that they are looking at being like, that's the one, that's the person that's going to lead us to the promised land, that kind of thing. None of these leaders are particularly inspiring to people. I think that that's definitely the truth. And of course, they each have their own failings and they each have their own reasons for why that's not the case. I will say over and over again, as I do on this channel all of the time, that I think a big reason why Jagmeet Singh is not doing better is because he's a Sikh. And if he was like a white dude named Jason Singer, I think he'd be doing a lot better. But that's Canada for you. That's not his fault. I think that's just who Canadians are. We are very immersed in the bipartisan distraction, as is our neighbors to the south and abroad. Well, and we keep falling for the same stupid lies. Like, we keep falling for the same stupid stuff. And it's so easy for us to fall for this self-aggrandizing belief that, like, oh, the meritocracy is real, and we just need to get better jobs, and if you're struggling, it's just you got to work harder, and we're unique and special people, and Western civilization needs to be protected, and all these things, like all of these sort of comforting myths that we tell ourselves about how the world actually works and what's going on, and then when you actually take a look at what's going on. The United States is a classic example, right? Like, I don't understand why there are people who are like hardcore Democrats or hardcore Republicans. Like, do they genuinely think that that those two parties are distinct in any way that's meaningful? Like, what? Probably not. Like, the Democrats and the Republicans are essentially in lockstep on every issue that really matters. Right? And that they create like wedge issues so that, me personally, like the Democrat fellow can personally seize power for myself because I personally want power, but we both work for the corporation. Like, we both work for the same guy. So it turns every single election in America into a vanity project, right? That nobody is running to improve the society in any meaningful way. Nobody is running so that they can get power and like eliminate student debt or create public housing or any of this. Like, it's all just vanity projects. And this election here in Canada essentially ends up being exactly that. Like, what is this election if not just a vanity project for the Liberals, for Justin Trudeau? That, like, he wanted his majority so that he didn't have to keep talking to the NDP or the Conservatives or any of these guys, right? Like, he keeps complaining about like dysfunction, right? Like, he keeps complaining about dysfunction in the House and how there's a toxic culture and all of this. And it's like, yeah, I think that maybe the Trudeau Liberals are probably the ones bringing the toxicity. I think the toxicity is probably coming from them more than others. And so it results in this vanity project of an election that didn't need to happen, right? We could have waited another year. I think people would have liked to wait another year for this election. And this sort of impatience, right? And it's very impatient. Like, just ride it out, bud. Just ride it out. Like, it was another year. You needed one more year of this. Just ride it out. But that's not what happened. So now we got this. And it's going to be nonsense, right? It's going to be nonsense. And meanwhile, and because of how odd this particular election is and how strange it is for everybody, 1 in 8 Canadians is completely undecided on how to vote, right? Like, 13% of the electorate is still undecided at this stage in the game. Like, that's a pretty, like, especially when you consider that some of these ridings are going to be decided by like hundreds of votes. Like, some of these ridings are going to be decided by hundreds of votes. We've seen that happen before in past elections. It's going to happen this time. And when you've got 13% of your electorate that's still undecided, it's still a horse race, man. Like, it's still, like, things can still go pretty wild. We're just waiting for the polls to actually start to come in to see, did the debates actually have an impact? Is the populace swinging in one way or another, or have they settled, right? But if you've got 13% of people saying that they're undecided, well, that can change. Yeah, money is the ultimate power in a society permeated with unfettered capitalism. And as you guys know, right, I'm just like money is not real. Like, that's the thing that's the funniest part about it, is that, like, money is fake. We made it up. It doesn't exist. It's not real. Literally, it's just like, it's this system that we have in place of withholding resources from the populace unless they manage to get a hold of this, like, money. Like, it's going to be the death of us, and it's going to be the death of us because it's completely out of step with any other reality in the world, right? Like, we live in a system that genuinely believes of itself that it can grow infinitely, that it doesn't need to respond to reality in any way that is meaningful, that it can just continue consuming and consuming and consuming, and that's acceptable. And when you look at, like, literally any other system that exists in the world, no system operates this way. That our monetary and financial systems are just a manifestation of our arrogance and just a manifestation of our inability to acknowledge that there are restrictions to what we can and cannot do. And we're just not interested in any of that. Some simple laws and regulations will go a long way with balancing the wealth gap, eradicating poor. Well, I mean, capitalists want to eradicate the poor, but probably not in the way that you're thinking about, Matthias. Yes, I mean, this is the thing, is that, and as climate change moves forward, and as these social issues like homelessness and poverty take hold, it's the heartbreaking part about the whole thing, well, not even the heartbreaking part, but just like the stupidity of the whole thing, is that it's going to end up costing us more, right? It's going to be far more costly to us, not only in real terms, but also in monetary terms, right? Even by how this stupid game that these financiers have erected for themselves, even based on those rules, dealing with the social consequences of ignoring climate change, dealing with the social consequences of ignoring wealth inequality, right? It's going to be more expensive ultimately, because it's far more expensive to deal with the consequences of ignoring these major issues than it is to resolve them. Something like climate change, for example, it's starting to cost the United States like hundreds of billions of dollars annually in order to deal with the consequences of climate change. Like, the New York subway system was literally flooded, like, this month. It was literally flooded. Hurricane Ida flooded the United States, flooded the New York subway system. How much money do you think that cost? Like, how much money do you think it cost New York to have their entire subway system flooded that way? Do you think they just like, oh, the water drained away and everything continued on as normal? Probably not, right? Probably not. Do you think it would be more expensive to just accept that, oh, the subway system floods and then we have to fix it afterwards? Or do you think it would be less expensive to actually put in some kind of protections or some kind of systems? Hey, Alex, how you doing today? And as we move forward, like, it's in 10 years' time, right, people are doing this work. Like, people are doing the work of being like, how much is it costing us to ignore climate change? And the evidence is going to be on the table, right? Like, in 10 years' time, people are literally going to be like, yeah, it would have cost us like $63 billion or $600 billion to resolve climate change. Climate change has already cost us like $2 trillion, right? That's where we're headed, and that's the trajectory we're on. So even according to this absurdist financial system that isn't rooted in reality and is just sort of made up in the first place, even by that metric, it's going to be a total failure. Oh, just got up from a nap. Lucky man. This second dose virus, like the second dose has been worse for me than the first one. The first one, like, it took a day out of me, but then I was able to kind of keep going on. But now I'm on day 3, and I'm just like, I'm still like, holy cow! Like, I feel it in my eyeballs, you know? Like, I feel it like in my eyes, just like, it really, really knocked me out, man. Really, really knocked me out. So, hopefully, I got to go to work at the cafe tomorrow, and hopefully it's not going to carry through to that. So here's a great shot that I wanted to put forward. People have been really referencing the film Idiocracy recently. It's a film I have yet to watch. I downloaded it, and I'm probably going to watch it tonight. When I got the second dose, it took me a week, John. No, I know I'll be fine. I'm just saying, like, I wish it wasn't taking this long. I wish it was just like... And you know what? I wish I was a young man again, damn it. I wish I was a young man, and I could just, like, bounce back from all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I am going to watch Idiocracy, and here's somebody who here's a shot of a bunch of wealthy people getting their boats into, like, a lake river system. You can see up here, this is where the water level used to be, right? So the water levels in these areas have dropped significantly, but these guys still want to get their boats in. And so it ends up kind of looking like a shot from this Idiocracy thing, where there's just like a bunch of fucking morons piling into a region, trying to, get their boating in. Brano, the thirst mutilator. Yeah, dude. Seems to me like this Idiocracy has kind of starting to figure it out a little bit. But the problem ultimately isn't that... there's no political will or no political this, that, or the other thing. It is that we are just very stupid. We are just very stupid. Hey, Bumbleguppy, how are you doing today, bud? I'm tired, man. I gotta be straight about it. I'm just tired. I'm like literally like sleeping all the time right now. Justin Trudeau falsely claimed he is not battling First Nations kids in court. Court documents show he is, right? Stunning he would say such a thing when his claim is so easily disproven. That's what was shocking about that moment, I think. And why that moment is going to go down, is going to be pulled from that debate as a key moment. Because, like, I just can't get that image of Jagmeet Singh just looking to the moderators and just being like, he can't say that. Like, he can't say that, right? Like, he can't say that. And... it's so obviously false. Like, it's so, like, you don't even do, like, you don't have to do that much research. And I just think it makes Trudeau look really bad. Yeah, let's watch the clip.
But Mr. Trudeau, sadly, and this, I don't take any pleasure in this, the calls to justice are out there, and you haven't acted on them. And I meant it when I said you can't take a knee one day if you're going to take Indigenous kids to court the next. That's not leadership.
Mr. Singh,
that's
you
not gonna
love that line about taking Indigenous kids to court. It's actually not true. We have committed to compensating those kids who went through that.
Listen,
and what's more than that, this is important, Mr. Singh.
No, you can't say you're not taking them to court when you're taking them to court.
When you talk
there
about
are kids out there that are being fought by you in court.
Oh, they didn't follow through on my favorite part where the moderator gets involved, because like. That was the best part of that whole thing, was that Jagmeet just standing there being like, he can't say that. Like, he can't say that. Like, that was, to me, the moment that really, really resonated with me, because it was like, yeah, it just goes to show what he thinks of his base. Yeah. And it also, like, there is this interesting thing that happens in power politics, right? Like, that people do expect politicians to lie. They expect politicians to lie. That if you were to talk to a liberal supporter on this issue, they'd probably try to get into the, like, fine technicality, minutia details of it, right? And but they litigated on cases directly impacting First Nations kids and families, and the whole thing is set out in the federal court record, and the hearings were webcast. Sorry, it's just like so fucking dumb. Like this is what's interesting about this particular, like, why choose to lie at that particular moment? You know, like, if I think Trudeau would have had better success if he had said, like, you're misrepresenting what's going on, right? Like that it's not fair to present this as if it's us saying one thing and then doing another when it's actually a much more complex issue. I think that Trudeau might have had a bit more success on that line. But this line where he's like, it's just not true, I'm just like, like, we can show that it is true. But again, like, we'll see. Like, the people are very dumb. People are very dumb and can go along with all kinds of weird stuff. I would like to point out that Some More News has a new one out. It's all about the infrastructure, right? Talks about infrastructure in regards to climate change. A good watch. These guys are great. If you don't know Some More News, go subscribe to Some More News. Really well researched stuff, really well written. Cody Johnson himself, really does capture the kind of manic, crazed insanity of the period that we're in. While also being one of the strongest newsmen in the business. Like, this is how disgraceful our media. I was thinking about this today, especially as I was watching this. This is how disgraceful our news media has become, right? Our news media has become so disgraceful that men like Cody Johnson are now becoming some of the best people that you can find in the business, period, right? Like, that's how disgraceful news media has become. It's also a reason why I think the debates were so kind of hard-nosed, that these debates were so hard-nosed and moderated with some backbone, because I think that media organizations are beginning to understand that they're being rejected, right? Like, news medias are, like, if you're sitting there as, like, CTV or Global News or any of these, you know you're being rejected, right? And yeah, Jacobin is coming up, yeah, and if you, like, the only power that you have as a media outlet is how many people are paying attention, right? If everybody stopped reading the New York Times, for example, that would be the end of it, right? It would be over. It just wouldn't exist as an entity any longer, and people would move on to something else. And the same is true of, like, CNN, MSNBC, like, all these guys who obviously have to be concerned, right? They obviously have to be concerned. Like, you're straight out looking at an institution that has like decades of existence, right? Like ABC News and all these places. And a lot of their programming gets less views than a Joe Rogan podcast, right? Like, really think about that. That, like, oh, you're telling me that, like, no one is tuning in to the news anymore. Like, no one's tuning in to even the, like, just regular newscasters any longer. And everybody is going to watch, like, Joe Rogan or people like Cody Johnson or any of this. Like, this is an enormous shift in how people are consuming news media. And interestingly, the hatred for the news media is coming from all sides. It's actually one of the issues that everyone seems to agree with, whether you're a People's Party or you're on the communist side or any of this. Like, literally everyone is saying that the news media sucks now. And, I mean, it sucks for obvious reasons, because it's been bought by neoliberal capitalists who are billionaires and who have every incentive to misinform the populace, right? I was there when CNN was founded on the newfangled cable TV and thinking, who would watch news all day? Well, here we are. Well, and to me, the biggest thing that's going on in the news media is that the only story that anyone actually wants to talk about, or that wants to learn something about, is the billionaires, right? That the billionaires are in control of huge industries and huge segments of the society, and that's the number one issue that people want to know about. And what's the number one issue that places like the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, places like the Globe and Mail, owned by David Thompson, right? Well, what's the number one issue that they'll simply never report on, right? Well, they'll simply never report on what the billionaires are doing. Why would they? Why would they tell people what they're up to, right? And they've become so obviously propaganda outlets, and they've become so obviously bought and so obviously part of this like neoliberal structure that people are just tuning out. Like the only people who are actually tuning in anymore are the people who are falling into like their niche market. So like Tucker Carlson's crowd, for example, are, you know, pretty obviously white supremacists because Tucker Carlson is a white supremacist. And and Trump was right. Fake news media, right? And they are fake news media. They're not actually interested in reporting on anything. They're not actually interested in talking about anything seriously. Yeah, how do we know that the media is simply asserting what we want to know about billionaires and there's actually little support? How do we know that the media is simply asserting what we want to know about billionaires and there's actually little support? I mean, anytime we poll the populace, like the news media polls worse than like cockroaches. Like people like, and that's not hyperbole, right? The news media polls very, very badly. Like people are very, very upset with news media and have been for a long time, and they've never been able to pull it. And so you're ending up with just like idiotic responses, right? Like, do you guys know Gutfeld? You know about this Gutfeld thing? Well, polls, but also just straight up viewership. Right? Just straight viewership. Like organizations like CNN, like their viewership is now mainly because they are being played in public spaces. You know, when you go to an airport and you look up and there's CNN playing at the airport, right? Well, that's ratings, right? That counts as ratings. And that's a deal that CNN has made with the airport system. So, okay, you'll play CNN, right? Like, and that'll be on and all of that. So you're literally looking at institutions who, like, the public viewership of these institutions is in the toilet. That it was the Trump administration that actually boosted everybody's ratings. Everybody's ratings went way up because of Trump. But now there isn't Trump any longer. Well, the ratings are back in the toilet again because politics has become kind of boring again. If the media was reported honestly that Forbes would print the wealth of the true 1% that's hidden from us, yes, exactly. I agree with that, pissed off. How you doing today, bud? Good to see you. And that's a big thing that you're bringing up here, bud, which is that like the Forbes richest Americans list is somewhat disingenuous itself, right? Like that just tracks the guys who have the wealth piled in the corner, right? That like, oh, I've got a big pile of money and so I'm the richest American and so I'm on the Forbes, 500 list and all that kind of stuff. But when you actually look at the structure of how the American system works, the Federal Reserve is a private bank, right? It is owned by private families, such as the Rothschilds, the Morgans, and the Rockefellers, right? Would you rather own a large segment of the economy, or would you rather own the economy, right? Like, and Forbes is not reporting on that, right? Forbes doesn't report on the fact that the economy, that the wealth itself is owned by independent families, right? Nobody talks about that. That's not well known or well disseminated. We don't know who the Rockefellers are. We don't know who the Rothschilds are. We don't know any of these guys. You don't know what they look like, right? If I showed you a picture of the Rothschilds, you wouldn't know who they are. And that's because these families understand pretty intrinsically that it is better to be unknown, right? Like that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he didn't exist, right? So if you're these families, you don't want people to know anything about you. You want to stay completely silent and stay out of the discourse. And sure, talk about Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a gift to these guys. Are you kidding me? Somebody like Elon Musk, who like so obviously wants to be on television, Like, Elon Musk wants to be known. He wants to be famous. He wants to be seen. He wants people to think that he's a genius. He wants that. It's so obvious that that's what he wants. What a gift. What a gift, right? To the Rothschild family, to the Rockefeller family. Like, what a gift. And but do you think any of these news organizations and news media outlets are actually going to report on that? Do you think that they're actually going to, like, even talk about what I just talked about? No, absolutely not. Why would they do that? Why would they out these guys like that, right? Like, these guys have a really good grift going on. They've got a really great game going on, right? They literally get to do absolutely nothing of value. Like, and I mean absolutely nothing of value. Like, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Morgans do nothing. Like, they are completely unproductive. They offer nothing to anyone to do anything. And their position in it is indicative completely of how capitalism works. Take a system that would otherwise function like a public bank, right? A government-run bank, right? Like the Bank of America or the Federal Reserve, one would assume. Take an institution that would work for the interests of the people and wedge yourself into it. And anytime the Federal Reserve, like, this is how the American currency eventually collapses. And I've always known this, which is that the Federal Reserve loans money to the American government at interest. So even if that interest is very, very low, like 0.01% low, right? Well, that means that is a loan that can never be paid back. Because how do you generate the wealth in order to actually pay the loan back, right? And this is how the currency works. So if I loan out $1, I need $1 and a penny back. Well, where do you get that penny from? Where's that penny come from? Right? So you can never pay back the loan. So the system inevitably collapses. But these owners, right, the Rothschilds and the Morgans and the Rockefellers, I'm sure there's another family in there that I'm completely forgetting, which is exactly the point. They don't really care, right? If the American economy collapsed and if the currency became completely worthless and oh goodness me, well, they still own the bank, right? They still own that system. They'd still, when it rebuilds itself, they'd still maintain that same exact system. And even if suddenly some piece of legislation came in that wrested that authority from them, oh, okay, well, we'll just retreat into the shadows, right? Like the Rothschilds, for example, they live in London, like they live in England, like they don't care. They're just going to retreat into the shadows, right? And nothing will ever happen to them, and history will forget them, because that's what they want. They want to be forgotten, right? They don't want you to know they exist in the first place. And our news media is 100% never going to report on them, right? Like, can you imagine? Hey, Ruth, how you doing? Can you imagine someone in the news media going around and actually reporting on what the Rothschilds were doing? Or here in Canada, right? Can you imagine somebody actually reporting on the regular what the Thompsons were doing? We don't do that. We don't pay attention to that. We don't pay attention to the real wealth in the society, right? We don't. Our news media doesn't actually report on that kind of stuff. And it's really manifesting itself in obvious and overt ways that people are abandoning the news media in heavy ways. And people like Cody Johnson are starting to find traction because Cody Johnson's actually reporting, right? Like, when you watch an episode of his show, you walk away very well informed about the subject. They're extremely well sourced. They're extremely well read. And he does it with this kind of, like, he captures the insanity of the society that we live in today. So I think more than most, Cody Johnson, if you don't know Cody Johnson, some more news. You should seek him out. Very good stuff. Yep, China and Russia backing away from the dollar as reserve in oil traded in yuan is a sign that the dollar, not long for this world. Well, and the renminbi, which is the currency that there's it's not the yuan. They've created a new currency, like a China-Russia linked currency called the renminbi that they're hoping to trade on the world stage. There's a lot of signs that the dollar is in a pretty big decline. Like, there's a lot of signs that the dollar is in a decline. And the United States empire is doing all kinds of ridiculous things in order to prop up the price of the dollar, right? Because the dollar is linked to oil. Those two are actually linked, right? That the price of the value of the dollar is linked to the value of oil. And oil has become the primary commodity that exists in the world in terms of trade and all of this. And so you end up with all kinds of stupid situations where, like, the Biden administration recently went and bombed oil fields throughout Syria. And you sort of think to yourself, well, why would they do that? Like, why would they bomb oil fields in Syria? Isn't the whole point that they are looking to get access to oil? But what that does is it reduces production, oil production in the world stage, and supply and demand, right? So production goes down. Well, that means that the oil you have actually goes up in value. And so by bombing the oil fields in Syria, it actually increases the value of what? The United States dollar, right? So it's, and these sort of idiotic war games and currency games that are going on in America today are just going to continue happening. Like, there's very, very credible evidence to show that the reason why the Bush administration wanted to get into Iraq when it wanted to get into Iraq was because Saddam Hussein was starting to trade in the euro, right? He was starting to trade not in U.S. dollars, but in the euro. And that by itself is a threat to the United States, right? So it's only a matter of time. Yep, very much. And it's scary as a U.S. person. The crash means hunger and riots. Yes, it does. Yes, it does, Bumbleguppy. Like, yes, it does. And there's no reason to... And that crash, the economic crash that we're talking about, like, it's coming. And it's going to come a lot sooner than people want. Like, the United States is going through... did I save this? Did I save a thing? But, like, Florida experienced... more deaths because of COVID yesterday than happened in 9/11, right? And that's just yesterday. Like, COVID is ravaging the United States. It's not pretty. Like, it's not pretty. Like, the ultimate death toll is going to be massive because of what has happened throughout the United States and because their system, the capitalist system of indoctrination, has backfired, right? That, like, oh, you're all individuals and your own personal freedom is what matters more than anything, and you don't need to do anything for your neighbor, and you don't need to consider anybody, you don't need to care about anyone else. So here's a situation in which you have to care about each other and you have to do something, and you've got to look after the people who are around you. And, oh, oops, I guess you're all going to die now, right? Like, that's what's happened. Yeah, same with Gaddafi. He started not using the petrodollar, and he was taken out. Yeah, exactly. I think, and like, Saddam Hussein was not a great man. Like, he was a real dick, right? I think you could say pretty straightforward that Saddam Hussein was an evil dude who wanted to maintain power for himself mainly. You can't really say the same thing of Gaddafi. So it really does show you that the United States, they don't care, right? Like, they don't care. They're going around bombing whoever they need to bomb and murdering whoever they need to murder to maintain their own position of wealth and prestige on the planet based on a fantasy, right? That the petrodollar is just like, it's just it's a fiat currency. It's literally made up. It just exists as air exists. And even less, like, it's less important than air by a great deal. But it's just like, it is a manifestation of our own kind of hubris and arrogance, right? It is just a manifestation of our own stupidity and this idea that we care more about the pursuit of, like, this ephemeral non-existent fantasy than we do about breathable air, clean water, sustainable systems, right? Our food system, our agricultural system, like, should tell you something, right? Should tell you something about who we are as people. That we there's this sort of phrase that I see on the internet all the time, which is every day we move farther away from God. And I think that that's true, that as we continue to pursue this created manic nothing that is money, right? This like false God that we've created for ourselves so that we can worship it. We become more and more detached from what the world actually needs and what the world is actually saying to us. And that seems to me that it's only going to get worse, because the United States is not doing anything to prevent this. Like, it's doing literally nothing. Like, it couldn't do less, right? Like, if like the infrastructure bill that's being talked about, it went from being like a $2 trillion infrastructure bill to being now like a $500 billion infrastructure bill that's mainly concerned about like repairing roads. It's just like, it's just a nothing. It's a big nothing burger, right? And like, what are we ever going to actually confront what needs to be done? And once you actually see what's going on, like once you understand what's going on, it's all just a big faff. It's all just a big, it's just a big macho, like George Carlin has a bit where he talks about how this is all just insecure white men with tiny penises going to other nations where brown people live with bigger dicks and bombing them, right? With missiles that are shaped exactly like the penises that the white guys are afraid aren't big enough, right? And there's something to this line of reasoning, because like, what else can it be at this point? Like, what else can it be? One of the largest contributors to the climate change catastrophe is the United States military. That you're polluting an awful lot when you get these super cruisers going through the waters, and you've got jets flying through the air, and you've got tanks running all over the place, right? You're polluting an awful lot if that's what you're doing. And what is it for? And when you take a look at Afghanistan, right, you really do see, like, well, what is it for? Like, you didn't achieve anything there. You didn't get anything done. You just transferred a lot of wealth into the hands of arms dealers. I'm scared as well. Our nations are so entwined that if America goes down, we will be right with you. Well, and guys, like, if America goes down, it might take the whole planet with it. Like, it's when you have like a rampaging psychopath, the way that the United States is a rampaging psychopath, it's not going to go down quietly. It's not just going to bow its head and be like, oh, you're right, world. Oh yeah, that's what's going, like, we are going to see just a temper tantrum. That the United States, as it gets rejected from the rest of the world, and as the United States kind of gets put in its corner, and as it continues to insist that it can continue to act this way, just like any petulant child would, the United States is going to do some shit that previously we thought would be unthinkable, right? Because the United States is following the death impulse. They're on the death impulse. That's why I call it a capitalist death cult, right? Like, it's doing everything it can to destroy the world through climate change catastrophe. That's for sure. Right? And then on top of that, it's doing everything it can to accelerate us towards a major conflagration and a major war. right? Like, it's doing everything it can to get into a war with China. That they are not interested in de-escalation. They are not interested in slowing down. They are not interested. They're not listening to anybody. Like, nobody, like, if you stand up and say, like, hey, the United States needs to de-escalate, the United States is like, fuck that, and they'll just keep funding it. Hey, Victini, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. I've been thinking about the zeitgeist and these watershed moments like 9/11, the Challenger shuttle explosion, and so on. Yeah. Well, and the 9/11 moment is great to bring up because I actually have an article here that's really pointing out that the story that we've been told about 9/11 was always that it was a where the heck is it? That it was always a I must have closed it on accident. Anyway, the story that we've been told about 9/11 is always that it was a have a good one, Alex. Is that it was always a ragtag group of rebels, basically, right? I was Osama bin Laden and just like a group of terrorists got together, and now we're seeing documentation that shows like no, it was Saudi Arabia. That Saudi Arabia made the plans, and Saudi Arabia created the event and organized it and all of this, and yet Saudi Arabia is probably one of our strongest, well, not probably, Saudi Arabia is one of our strongest allies in the region. So what's the story there? Why is it that one of the strongest allies that America has in this conflict is also launching terrorist attacks against the United States? COVID is another real event that, while not changing material reality, shapes consciousness for decades after. Yeah. I wonder if they'll release anything tomorrow that has any meat to it, or if it'll just be redacted nothings. I suspect it'll be redacted nothings for the most part. Silverlight, like, let's be real, like they're not gonna reveal anything. They're not gonna indict people. But already, like, from the 9/11 truther kind of perspective, the shift away from it being like a group of small-scale terrorists to it being state-sponsored terrorism is a massive shift in the discourse. Like, what the hell is going on with Saudi Arabia, man? Why is Saudi Arabia launching terrorist attacks against us, and then those are our allies? What's the story? And of course, in my view, it boils down to like the Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Bush, like that crew, they wanted some event like this to happen, right? And so they, like the truther movement has been saying the entire time, they helped manufacture it. Like, Saudi Arabia said that they would do it, and the Bush administration went along with it. Like, that's pretty straightforward shit, right? And this idea that it's like some sneaky conspiracy and underhanded and all of this, like, what are you talking about? Like, the Bush administration is in bed with Saudi Arabia, like, going back to like Bush Senior, for God's sakes. They're good buddies, right? You can see the pictures of them hanging out. It's extremely easy for me to believe that, like, the Bushes were talking to the Saudi princes and just saying, like, hey, can you fly some fucking planes into some buildings? That'd really get some shit started here. And that would help you, Saudi Arabia, right? Like, you would be the most important powerhouse in the region if you did this. And that'd let us get into Iraq and all this kind of stuff. And you'd be like our big ally working in the region with us. And I could see the Saudi princes just being like, yeah, okay. Right? Like, it's not so much of, especially 9/11, like, so much of public consciousness regarding 9/11 comes from a pretty hard level of naivety. Like, I talk to people, like, about 9/11, even at the year it was happening, right? And people were just naive as shit. People were naive as shit about 9/11, man. And still are. And now we are getting to a point where I think people are starting to open. It's the Jeffrey Epstein moment. The Jeffrey Epstein moment, I think, finally cracked people's consciousnesses open enough to realize that, oh yeah, like wealthy billionaires will do psychopathic things on massive, large scales. Like they will set up sex islands, right? Like they'll set up like pedophile sex islands. Well, if they can do that, like the planning 9/11 is actually not that difficult. Like it's not. Like what do they need? They need 3 planes, right? Like it's a pretty straightforward operation if you ask me. They just needed to do it, and they did. So yeah, class consciousness is will grow as a result, and I think the class consciousness is beginning to grow. Like people are starting to see that we have owners, right? Like we have owners. Like it's very, very clear that that's the case. And you got to kind of live in a pretend world. Caitlin Johnstone, always worth reading. Yeah, here, let's actually... She is very, very prescient, right? Like, she really... hey, Demand Better, how you doing, bud? Caitlin Johnstone is one of those people who really helps me get over the reality that we are going to lose great minds like Noam Chomsky, right? That we are going to lose Noam Chomsky soon, within the next 5 years, right? Like maybe he can push, but like within the next 5 years for sure, I think, if I was a betting man. And so I lament, right? I lament before he's even gone. I lament, and I think like, well, what are we going to do? You know, Noam Chomsky's gone, and he's going to be gone, and that means that we're losing one of the most powerful allies that we have. But someone like Caitlin Johnstone exists, and Max Blumenthal, and these guys, and really remind me that like there are going to be other people who are picking up that baton, who are continuing forward, who are going to be doing that kind of analysis, that kind of hard-nosed analysis that we need to have. And so, it's very much, it's like the Grecian Hydra, right? That Noam Chomsky, he's the head that gets cut off, and from it 2 more will spring, right? And it just you won't be able to stop it. And I think Caitlin Johnstone really proves that that's the case. Where did this article exist, bud? I can't find it. Maybe, I bet you if I go to Twitter, chances are good she's put it. Here you go. 20 years of phony tears about 9/11. Yeah, gotta go right to the source. Yeah. You know what, man? After that heaping on of praise, I'm just going to read this out loud, I think. The mass media are churning out articles and news segments commemorating the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, many of them featuring adoring retrospectives of their celebrity president's actions as a U.S. senator that day. Biden's ceremonial PR tour to New York City, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon can be expected to receive a great deal of coverage, as outrage swells over the president's controversial new nationwide vaccine mandate. And it's all just so very, very stupid. This nation, which has spent 20 years weeping about its victimization with Bambi-eyed innocence, reacted to 9/11 with wars, which killed millions and displaced tens of millions, and ushered in an unprecedented new era of military expansionism, which has funneled trillions of dollars to some of the worst people in the world. Compared to the horrors the United States unleashed upon the world under the justification of 9/11, 9/11 itself was a family trip to Disneyland. The death and destruction visited upon the Iraq alone dwarfed the 2,977 people killed on 9/11 by orders of magnitude. Hell, this was true of the death and destruction the U.S. had been inflicted on Iraq even before 9/11. In a saner, more emotionally intelligent world, it is those deaths that America would be focused on this September the 11th. There's a great thread being shared around on Twitter right now by someone who found a book full of political cartoons published in the wake of 9/11. Well, let's just click on that. We'll watch that later. And it's a perfect reminder of just how insane people were being driven by mass media manipulation during that time. The brazen Islamophobia, the flag-waving jingoism, the mawkish histrionics, and the government bootlicking contained in those vapid comics are like an emotional time portal back to the lizard brain mentality of that point in history. I especially recommend it to those who are too young to remember how people came to support the monstrous foreign policy decisions made in the aftermath of 9/11. It's also an excellent lesson into why it is always best to avoid being swept up in the emotionality of a major event that's getting a lot of narrative push, no matter how loudly the mass media are shrieking about it, and no matter how many people of the people around you get swept up in it. There was no real reason Americans needed to respond to 9/11 with slobbering patriotism and the banging of war drums. It would have made sense for everyone to feel shocked, afraid, angry, and sad, but that's all would have happened had their minds not been manipulated by the mass media and the Bush administration into believing that the sane response to a terrorist attack is to start launching full-scale regime change invasions to sovereign nations. Americans could just as easily have felt sad for a bit and had that be the end of it. Imagine what a better world we'd be living in if the public had not consented to wars and had instead just felt their feelings for however long it took to feel them, and had that be that. Without being told so by solemn-looking pundits and politicians, it never would have occurred to ordinary people that the sane response to an attack by al-Qaeda was to invade and occupy Afghanistan, much less Iraq. People would have expected to see the individuals responsible for the attacks captured and brought to justice, just as they've seen happen with every other terrorist attack in their country, but on their own it would never have occurred to them to think of it as an act of war, for which wars were an appropriate response. But wars were planned. The U.S. had already been strategizing to oust the Taliban before 9/11. Donald Rumsfeld was pushing for the Iraq invasion within hours of the planes striking. Further wars were planned within days. The official 9/11 narrative itself was riddled with gaping plot holes, and mass media pundits were fired if they didn't support the Iraq invasion. So people were psychologically conditioned by mass-scale propaganda to believe that 9/11 was some unforgivable atrocity so egregious that it could only be paid for by rivers of blood. And that conditioning remains today, as we will see from brainwashed empire pundits weeping their crocodile tears on the 20th anniversary of an event which, compared to the consequences of their government's retaliation, wasn't actually a very big deal. It would have been infinitely better for everyone if America had done nothing, absolutely nothing, in response to 9/11, or better yet, if it had left the Middle East altogether to make sure there are no extremist groups wanting them dead due to their actions there. But again, wars were planned, and the public was psychologically brutalized into accepting them. This is what we should all remember on 9/11. Not those 2,977 deaths on U.S. soil, as sad as they were. They've been grieved more than enough by the general public. Now it's time to begin addressing the giant stain upon our collective soul that is the vastly greater evils those deaths were exploited to justify. That's good shit, man. Like, that's pure source shit. That's pure shit. Like, if reading this news stuff was like cocaine, this is like some clean Colombian cocaine right here. Not that I've ever done cocaine. I don't know. I literally don't know what I'm talking about. But while Trump is hosting a money-making boxing match with Junior because 9/11 is very important to his bank account, I can't imagine what he would be doing today if he were president. Yeah, snorting Caitlyn, exactly. Yeah, dude, what would Trump be doing today if he was president, dude? Like, oh man, it's 9/11 was the worst deal we'd ever had, the worst deal in history. We should have gone in harder. We should have gone in more. So let's see some of these let's see some of these. The best editorial cartoons of the year, 2002, edited by Charles Brooks. What do you call it when you kill an innocent men, women, and children? A dot? Okay. Oh, yeah. Holy war. Oh, I bet you it's because I didn't click on the thing. Yes, a holy war. There you go. Oh, my goodness. These are going to be horrible. Look at this. Terrorism. Anytime, anywhere. Holy war, bin Laden. Like, geez Louise, man. Like, these are going to be evil and ridiculous. Band of Brothers, Ordinary Americans, Extraordinary Courage, the police and firefighters of New York City. And I don't want to... the first responders of 9/11, like, those guys needed to be treated way better than they actually were treated. We've reached the top. Yeah, America sharpening its talons. Sharpening its talons. Get ready to go, right? Yeah, gonna. These cartoons are like vicious, man. To think I always hated cops. To think I always hassled blacks. Yeah, that's right. 9/11, bringing the cops and the black community together, as always. The root of all evil. We're onto something with this one, actually. Terrorism, got the dollar bill, right? I remember sometimes I make music and I make songs and stuff like this, and people critique some of the stuff that I do by saying, like, it's a bit on the nose, don't you think? And I've come to the point now where I'm like, yeah, that's where you want it, right? You want it to be on the nose. Like, these guys wearing these, like, red MAGA hats, do you think that they needed, like, some kind of subtle, introspective shit? No, dude. They need it right on the fucking nose. Like, pop! Right on the nose. And something like this I look at and I go, like, yeah, that's good. That's on the nose. I think that they should be less... but you could put anything here, right? This could be, instead of terrorism, this could be, like, the military-industrial complex, right? Just like, it's the most depressing thing to think about. That literally the United States is sending, like, planes and fighter jets and helicopters and bombs and ships and vessels and troops into this region, and it's literally only so that defense contractors can make money. That is it. That is the exclusive reason any of this is happening. So defense contractors and oil executives and oil barons can make more money for themselves. But money is itself not a thing. And so it's just this, like, literally we went into a region and demolished it and destroyed it down to rubble for nothing. And the only reason the American empire seems to be getting away with it is because those people are brown. And who cares? Like, it really is revealing, like, the dark center of the human ethos. That, like, we are a very, like, white supremacist nation that truly, if there had have been no economic benefit to going over there and destroying them, I think we would have done it anyway. Because we are driven by an ideology, we are driven by an impulse that takes us into a path of death and darkness. That truly there are like two forces and two impulses that exist within each person, which is the death impulse, the impulse to return to the place we originated from, right? And the impulse to create, the impulse to actually build something and create something in this reality that we live in, right? The impulse to grow and the impulse to die. And we are completely, as a species and a culture, motivated by the death impulse. And there's no, it doesn't seem as though there is a, like people talk about how, oh, well, we need to wake up. There needs to be an awakening. And it's like, that is true, but awaken to what? And I believe very strongly that we just need to realize that, hey, instead of destroying, we can build. Instead of destroying, we can create. Instead of focusing on our own personal death, we can focus on building something for the next generation. But the problem that the United States and the Western world generally is having is that it's so focused on the individual, right? That this mythology of individualism exists. Well, if you're someone like Jeff Bezos, right, and all that matters and all that you've ever been taught matters is yourself, and you've been taught and focused on that your own personal reality and your own personal existence and you authoring your own fate and all of this is all that matters, well, how do you think such a person is going to act as they face their own death? Do you think they're going to face their own death with dignity and grace? Do you think that they're going to look at their own death as part of the larger natural system that we all face and that we all exist in? Or do you think they're going to face it as a petulant child would and try to destroy everything else with them? Because if they're the only thing that matters, right? If they're the only thing that matters, as their culture has been espousing to them for their entire life, if they're the only thing that matters, well, then who cares if they destroy everything else on the way out, right? They're going to die, and that's the tragedy. Your death is meaningless. Your death doesn't matter at all. You're just some little NPC to them. You don't really exist as far as they're concerned. You don't matter, because the only thing that matters is them, and they're going to die, so you might as well too. Because you're not important. They're important. And this is the end result. This is the logical end result of this failed system of individualism and this failed ideology of trickle-down economics and just bootstrap yourself and all of this kind of stuff that we've been peddled. That the end game of it is, well, if I'm going to die, I might as well bomb everything else. I don't need it. And that's following the death impulse that exists within all of us. When someone like Jeff Bezos could look at his death and think, well, here I go, right? I'm going to go just like everybody goes, and we all face it, and it's part of being alive in this world, and we can't ignore that. Well, what am I going to leave behind for other people? What is the world going to look like when I go? And if someone like Bezos cared about that, like he could be erecting systems and institutions that people would praise him for 1,000 years, right? Like he has so much wealth and so much power that he could be erecting enormous institutions that would alleviate poverty, that would alleviate suffering, and could do so on a permanent scale until somebody literally assaulted them and dismantled them intentionally. But he's not going to do that. Because the tragedy is that he dies, not that you suffer. Hey Loaf, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. You gotta wonder how much that mentality underlies the continuous rise of mass shootings in the United States. Yeah. If I'm the only one that matters and my existence is miserable, then why not destroy as much as possible on the way out? I think that that's a good connection to make, bud. I think that's a really good connection to make. And like, especially like the schools, the mass shootings being driven by a sense of despair, right? A sense of just like that things are not going to get better, that they are only going to keep getting worse. And so I'm just going to go out on my terms, right? Because I'm the one that matters. The rest of you are just NPCs in my video game, right? Yeah, I wonder if any nukes have found their way into the hands of billionaires yet. Crap. Yeah. I mean, we have to assume that it's the case, right? We have to assume that it's the case. The U.S. culture is so inherently violent. Yes, it is. The media and movies, the romance with guns, the militarism. It's hard to live here and not get caught up in it. Colonial capitalist culture is a death cult. Yes, it is. And I've been saying this for a long time, right? How else could you describe it? And it's going to get, like, so far, the United States has managed to convince large segments of its own population that it is something other than what it is. But the reality is, it's like, if it is willing to go overseas and destroy Iraq and Afghanistan, Oman, Libya, Syria, and if it's willing to go down into like Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, right, Bolivia, all these places, and cause mass trouble and mass difficulty and bomb those places and destroy those places, it's not going to have any problem whatsoever doing that to like Louisiana, right? Like it's not going to have any problem doing that whatsoever to like Missouri, right? This idea that people in the United States actually think that they're protected, and near as I can tell, they only think that they're protected because they're white. That's really what it has come down to for many people in the United States. That they're sitting there going like, I am white, therefore my state will protect me. And like, the military-industrial complex might as well, like it is the force that's in charge in the United States. Like, there's no reason to pretend otherwise. That the United States is not ruled by the White House. It's not ruled by elected representatives, right? It's ruled by the military and the military-industrial complex. And should there be mass dissent or mass this, that, or the other thing, like, what do you think they're doing funneling all those resources into police departments? What do you think they're doing by attempting to suppress the populations that you see throughout the United States right now? Like, the United States, as it collapses and as it's no longer able to maintain this system of warfare, right, overseas, well, all of that is going to become internal. All of those vets come home. All of that comes home. Like, that's just a historical truism, by the way, right? You can see that in literally every empire that has ever existed in humanity. That the horror show that the society is willing to inflict on other regions, it 100% inflicts upon itself. That is coming in the United States. That we are going to see the rise of extreme neo-fascist leaders. Like, people who will have us longing for the days of Donald Trump. And it is extremely unlikely that the United States is going to turn out of that. It's extremely unlikely that some like Bernie Sanders style figure actually stands up and actually gets power and actually becomes the president and actually manages to change any of that stuff. That's extremely unlikely. It's far, far, far more likely that we are going to see competent fascists continue to get iterated out of a system that generates fascists, and that as they can no longer pursue the death impulse overseas because they no longer have the same amount of clout or resources to be able to achieve their objectives, that they're going to turn on their own people. The more they lose control, the more erratic and tighter they pull on the leash. Exactly. And make no mistake that as China begins to grow, as China begins to find itself being the most stable powerhouse in the region, there will be an American leader who looks at the nuclear option. We know that they do this. Like, we know that they talk this way. We know that they think about this. We know that they do that. Like, this isn't something that I'm saying like as a hyperbolic, hysterical sort of thing. Obama, Clinton, and Biden all said that nuclear bombs were on the table, right? They have all said this. The Bush administration said it. You can go back to Nixon and see him literally getting talked off of dropping nuclear bombs on Cambodia by Henry Kissinger, for God's sakes. And as the United States declines in power, it's not just going to decline in power gently over time and like, oh, well, everything's fine and all that kind of stuff. It's going to do some really fucking dumb shit. And it's going to do dumb shit specifically just to show the world that it does. Like, that's the thing that people don't really get about where the United States is headed. Like, after World War II, Truman drops 2 nuclear bombs on Japan that he didn't need to drop, right? The reason he drops those nuclear bombs on Japan is to show the Russians that they would. That's it. And the idea that they're not going to do that again after they've already proven that they will. So the question is just where, right? The question is just who they do it to, right? Because, and this idea, I've been thinking about this idea for a long time about how the Chinese, like, the Americans can't go to an outright war with China. Like, that's suicidal, but they are suicidal, right? Like, they are suicidal. And so this idea that they're not going to launch some kind of suicidal attack against China in order to ensure the mutual, like this deterrence strategy that the United States talks about, where it's mutually assured destruction. Well, the reason why it's okay everybody has nukes is because nobody would use them because it's mutually assured destruction. Well, if you're suicidal, you don't care about that, right? You don't give a shit about that. You know you're on your way out. You know you're about to die. You're a selfish brat who thinks that the only thing that matters is you. And so while you're on the way out, just drop the nukes. Who cares, right? You're dead anyway. Loaf of Kropotkin is my new favorite YouTube user, best name ever. Nihilism sucks, though, generally. Nihilism, people forget to go past the nothing doesn't matter phase to the I'm not going to establish communism, why not phase. My position on nihilism is that at least it's honest. Like, it is an honest position to take, I think. That anytime I've encountered a genuine nihilist, and anytime I've talked to an actual nihilist, I've been like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. Like, I get where you're coming from. I do think that nihilism suffers from what I have come to call the narrow view, which is that, like, oh, like, your own perspective of what's going on is the perspective of what's going on. You guys are Joker pilled. Yeah. Yeah. I love Joker, man. Do yourself a favor if you haven't seen Joker. Do yourself the favor and watch Joker. And if you have seen Joker and it's been a while, go watch it again. It's really good. Like, it's really good. It's very difficult not to align with Arthur. Apparently they're doing a sequel, right? Are they doing a sequel? Joker sequel. I've heard. Okay. It's probably happening, yeah. Apparently Joker 2 is further along than we thought. Joker sequel confirmed with Joaquin Phoenix, but not Batman. That's fine. We'll see. I'm a bit skeptical of them doing a sequel. I'm a bit skeptical of them doing a sequel because the first one was so, like, it was so perfect. Like, they hit it. They nailed what they wanted to nail, and they got what they wanted to get out of it. And so I don't know where they can go from here. Like, what other social critique could they lay out? And I just can't help but feel that it would just be like, you know, an opportunity for them to faff about with the Joker, you know? It's like, oh, okay. And if you're not going to have Batman, like some of these articles are saying, like, but not Batman. I'm like, well, then what the fuck? Like, come on. You need to have Batman. In my view, that's the true reason you would want to do a Joker sequel, is not so much to delve into the psychosis of the Joker, because that's been well established, but to dive into the psychosis of the Batman. Because Batman is fucking obviously got some shit going on, right? Like, that's obvious the case. Hold on, there's a new Matrix trailer? Hold on. Are you serious? They're doing a new Matrix movie.
Thomas? You seem particularly triggered right now. Can you tell me what happened?
I've had dreams that weren't just dreams.
Am I crazy? We don't use that word in here.
Hi.
Have we met?
One pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small.
Are they seriously just straight up doing a Matrix reboot?
Mother gives you, don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall.
Time to fly.
And if you go chasing rabbits,
If you want the truth, Neo, you're going to have to follow me.
This just straight up looks like a reboot. They're just like, yeah, let's just reboot this.
The only thing that matters to you is still here. I know it's why you're still fighting and why you will never give up. You don't know me, no?
when logic and proportion have fallen, so be dead. And the white knight is talking backwards, and the red queens are overhead. Remember what the dogma said.
After all these years, to be going back to where it all started. back to the Matrix.
This straight up. First of all, okay, let me preface this by saying straight out, I love The Matrix. I think that I don't mind that they're doing a Matrix 4. I will probably, I shouldn't say probably, I will definitely watch this movie. That just straight up looks like a reboot, doesn't it? Like, it just straight up looks like take the first Matrix, do it again, make the special effects better, because now we have like these crazy special effects abilities that we have now, and just like do that. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it's not. I doubt that I will walk out of this new Matrix movie being like, "Whoa, what a mind twisting, like crazy, thoughtful exploration of the psychic experience of being a human." And it's just literally like, nah, it's just another Matrix movie. You guys want to go watch another Matrix movie? You know? Like Back to the Future, you know, Back to the Future doesn't blow our minds away with any kind of like crazy, like philosophical kind of thing or any of that kind of stuff. It's just a good time. And I feel like that's exactly what that is going to be. And they're going to hit it, they're going to nail it, everything's going to be great, it's going to be a good movie from start to finish. And then we'll, you know, move on with our lives. Oh, the new Star Wars trilogy, man. I didn't even watch the last episode of the new trilogy because I was just like, it's so obvious, just bullshit. It's so, like, they can't even tell just a straightforward story, right? That, like, they always had to, like, self-referentialize, or they always had to, like, analyze itself and then comment on itself. The self-commentary that Disney is doing is so exhausting. Like, stop trying to comment on yourself as an institution. Stop doing it. Just tell good stories. It's much easier than you're making it. And the new Star Wars trilogy was exactly that. It was just constantly referring to itself, constantly bringing up stuff to like retcon shit, and just like constantly doing it. And I'm like, just stop that. It's obvious you're doing it. It's really, really, and it ruins your story. Makes it very difficult. Holy crap, I want a Matrix reboot written by Lana Wachowski now that she knows it's a great trans metaphor. Yeah, the new trilogy sucked. No, it sucked. It just sucked. Like, Rogue One was good. Like, Rogue One was good. I think that if you want to see, like, a movie that is actually a movie, that is actually, like, a good story that is well told, Rogue One is the way to go. Like, if you want to see a good Star Wars story. But the new trilogy was just, like, it was so obviously... Like, there's a difference between a good movie and there's a difference between, like, religious propaganda, right? And the new trilogy is religious propaganda. It's just for the people, it's for the acolytes, it's for the people who are the true believers, right? I never watched Han Solo because I knew from the outset that it was going to be dumb. Like, the whole thing is stupid. Who cares about that movie? Like, who gives a shit at all about that movie? Like, it's literally just a fan service wank that they can never do right. They can never do right. You can never please the true fans, right? The people who really like Han Solo. And you can never please the people who don't really care about Han Solo. Because, and in the end, they don't tell, I guarantee they don't tell a good story, right? That, like, and the problem with the Han Solo story, and again, I haven't watched it, but it's Disney, right? Like, it's Disney. And so it's going to be, like, full of cutesy bullshit the whole time. And it's just going to be full of these, like, little self-referential winks and nods. And it's just going to be full of nonsense bullshit. Like, guys, how did anyone think that in the second movie in the newest trilogy, everybody remembers how like they're running away in a ship, and there's another ship following it, and they can't get anywhere, and everybody's just stuck on the ship, and everybody literally looked at that and thought, yeah, that's some good storytelling right there. Here's some great storytelling. Bunch of people trapped on a ship that can't go anywhere. That's so fucking boring that they literally created a side quest for other characters to go on and actually focus on a story that had absolutely nothing to do, like 0% to do with the entire rest of not only the film, but the trilogy itself. And this got put to film, and then they put it in front of us, and we were actually supposed to watch that and be like, wow, that's good storytelling. Like, I don't watch any more of this schlock. This schlock that's coming out of Disney, and it's just schlock. Like, it's just like literally like take an ice cream scoop and dig into the fucking garbage that gets shit out of the asshole of like the schlock, and then you get put on your plate, and you're just supposed to be like, that's some good schlock. And it's the same fucking story over and over and over again. It's the same fucking shit, right? They just instead of it being a white dude as a wizard, well, now it's a white girl as a wizard, right? And it's like they just kind of replace the illusionary parts of it, and they sacrifice their story every time. And it's just like I'm just bored of it. Like, I'm bored of it. Like, forget about the like commentary of like this is the culture of a death cult attempting to amuse itself, right? That's what Disney is. That it is a death cult attempting to amuse itself so that it will ignore the fact that it's dying, right? Like, that's what Disney is doing. But they're not even doing it well. It's not even good, right? Like, if they were doing it well, I would be a bit more impressed, but they're not, right? The Disney's whole shtick is, don't pay attention to the fact we're murdering you, right? Like, that's their whole shtick. And they can't even do that. It's just like, and so, and then even more disgracefully, I think that Disney has come to accept that people go to see their films to hate on them, right? That you go to see a Disney film to shit on it, right? That you're not going to have a good time. But you not having a good time is part of the good time, and Disney knows that's the truth. And so they keep making these shitty remakes and reboots and all this kind of stuff because they don't give a shit if you like it or not. They only want your money. That's all they want is your money. So they don't need to tell a good story. And in fact, if they tell the story badly enough, you'll come and watch it just to see how bad it is. So the true solution to all of this is stop watching Disney shit. Just straight up stop watching it. Like, straight up. Stop watching it. That's not going to happen, obviously, because it's literally the only thing we get shoved into our maws anymore. It's literally the only thing that gets made anymore. But like, what do you do when your storytellers are no longer interested in telling good stories? When they're literally saying, like, yeah, come see, like, a well-funded, enormous, spectacular, just disgraceful destruction. Let's see what you guys are saying. Sure, episode 8 was super terrible. The side quest with the escape on horses and the horse race place was so bad. Yeah, pointless. Just so pointless. Like, literally just Disney being like, let's have a moment where we save some animals. Animals are good, and people like animals. Has nothing to do with anything. Nothing to do with fucking anything. And Disney has fallen for... I listened to a great lecture given by the South Park guys, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, that they actually walked in to a seminar, a writing seminar. They literally just walked into the room and said, hey guys, do you want to hear what we have to think about things? And the class, including the professor, were just like, yeah, come on in here, right? And they had this moment where they were talking about storytelling and how if you do a scene and you have a scene, even if it's a really good scene, and then you do another scene, and if you can say "and then" between those two scenes, it's probably a bad story, right? Because if you're saying "and then" between scenes, then there's no actual conflict. It's just a series of events that's occurring, right? So this happens, and then 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 there's a fight, and then the credits roll. And what I just described there is literally every Disney movie that's been made in the last 20 years, right? This happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And the guys say, what you want is you want to say, you want to have things like therefore or because, right? And of course I'm missing, like there's a big one that they would say, and I'm missing it, but that there's a consequence. The scene happens, and then that has a result over here. So this happens because this, right? And then there are complications and conflicts, and that these complications eventually find themselves all together and resolve themselves because the whole story is an intertwined meshing of like Stan went to the store and bought a thing, and Cartman is over here doing something, and then those two events conflict with one another and don't have a clean resolution, and it all kind of collapses down. That it's not this and then and then and then and then. And since I saw that lecture, I've sat down and I've seen a couple of these Disney films, and that's exactly what they do. It's exactly what they do. That introduce the main character, and then the main character gets into a fight, and then there's a reveal that the main character has superpowers, and then there is another conflict on the streets where he has another fight, and then he's hiding from the person he's trying to hide his secret from, right? And then the villain is trying to enact their big super plot, and then the hero stops it, and then the credits roll. And that's like every single Disney film you've ever seen. And it's not a story. Where's the actual conflict? Like, why is this person motivated to stop the villain in the first place? Like, really? Like, why is Spider-Man ever motivated to stop these guys? Like, that's a big one. Outside of this, like, weird, like, my Uncle Ben died, and now I gotta go stop the villains for the rest of the, because with great power comes great responsibility, right? Like, it's like, but that's not real. Like, that's not something that we actually care about. Disney has a long history of oil drilling existing proletariat culture, yeah. Well, and now we're caught in a feedback loop, right? We can't make new shit, right? And Matrix 4 is no different, right? We're caught in this perpetual nostalgia-based feedback loop. Because if we create something new, like the greatest threat to the capitalist system that we live in is something new, right? No, this is the end of history, guys. This is it. We did it. We're at the apex now, right here. The capitalist society is the best it ever gets. And so the best that you can ever do under that kind of ethos is to just continue remaking the stuff you've already remade, and in a pale attempt to do it better. And there's already been like hard admissions that there are certain films you cannot do that with, right? Like everyone agrees that a Princess Bride remake would be a disaster. Everyone agrees. Even if they actually like updated the graphics and actually did all the kind of stuff and so on and so forth. Everyone agrees. No, a Princess Bride reboot is a complete error. Total mistake, non-starter. Like, do an event and just release the film again, right? Like, just completely do that. But that hasn't extended into the whole rest of the culture. And so we keep doing, like, another Matrix, another Star Wars, another Indiana Jones, another Blade Runner, another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, another superhero movie, another Avengers, another Iron Man, another, like, and it's always just another of the same thing we've seen before. right? Over and over and over and over and over again. And now it's getting so bad that it's literally like, hey, remember Beauty and the Beast that we, like that masterpiece that we created in the 90s? Yeah, we're going to do that again, but worse. Oh, hey, Aladdin, same story, right? Yeah, Robin Williams is dead, and he's sort of a seminal part of that whole thing. But instead of doing just like a re-release and like celebrating the masterpiece that we made back then, we're going to make that movie again, but worse, right? Like, and it's always that. It's always we're going to do it again, but worse. And it's because they just pick up a set of keys and just dangle the keys in front of you, going like, hey, isn't the special effects so much better, but the storytelling is trash, right? Because they don't know how to tell a good story anymore, nor are they interested in telling a good story anymore, because people go to the movies and pay for this shit even if it's bad. That hating the movie is now part of the experience. That we're supposed to hate the movie. Boo! $20, right? They don't care. Pay me. Right? I don't give a fuck if you hate it. I hate if you come to see the movie. What did you think of Blade Runner 2049? Did it live up to the original, or is it just okay? I gotta tell you, I started watching it and I just stopped watching it. Like, that's maybe the biggest insult that I can levy to a film. I started watching it and I just stopped watching it. I think it came down to, like, they introduced their villain, and I just thought that the villain was the least compelling villain I'd maybe seen in film. Like, he was just a cartoon. He was just like a cartoonish, I'm evil because I'm evil, right? If your villain's motivated by, like, I'm evil because I'm evil, like, I genuinely don't care. Like, I can't continue watching your film. If you, I thought that the performance that was being given by Ryan Gosling was acceptable. I mean, he really was just sort of walking around looking like Ryan Gosling, right? So, mission accomplished. The special effects were fine, right? Like, I mean, they were what I expected to see. The weird relationship that Ryan Gosling's character has with his, like, holographic, like, this character here, I suspected manifests into nothing important. And I can't say if that is or is not the case. But just, like, there are no stakes in that movie. Not really. That it is very much just like, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And the villain is just evil because he's evil. And I'm just like, not really interested to see how it ends because it doesn't really start. Like, there isn't really a story there, right? Like, what's the story? Like, for real, like, what's the story? And near as I can tell, the story is just the lead protagonist will eventually fight this evil guy because protagonists fight antagonists. Okay, great. Like, the original Blade Runner had a very set, clear story from the outset. That the protagonist was hunting these guys, right? And so there's this element of hunting these guys. And through the hunting, there's a reveal of a deeper narrative that continuously unfolds. And there is no, like... And what's great about the original Blade Runner is that the antagonists... Right, the antagonists, the ones that I'm forgetting his name, but that Han Solo is going after. I forget everybody's name. Oh my god, I forget the protagonist's name and I forget the actor's name. Isn't that hilarious? But I can remember Han Solo. He is set up as the protagonist to go and hunt these guys, and as the story unfolds, the antagonists of the piece are steadily revealed more and more to be sympathetic, and in fact, you end up kind of feeling as though these guys they aren't the antagonists of the piece, that the antagonists of the piece are actually the Blade Runners and the system that's supporting the enslavement of these people. That's why the original Blade Runner was such a powerful piece, because it through the telling of the story, it inverts your expectations, and it takes you on this journey of being like, yeah, gunslinging detective cowboy type, right? Literally casting Han Solo, right, to go into this kind of fucking thing. And as the story is told steadily and steadily, you realize that that the antagonist of the piece is the society itself, right? That the society is the antagonist. And it just, none of that was happening in Blade Runner. Like, the antagonist was literally just like, He might as well have just been, like, sitting there, like, scheming away, right? Like, just fuck that. Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, the lightsaber battles are always badass. Like, the shit they do in the lightsaber battles is thumbs up on that all the time. Like, for real, I am to the point when it comes to Star Wars movies that sit me down, like, literally have a character walk in, draw the lightsaber, and just show me, like, a sick-ass lightsaber battle for 2 hours, right? I don't need to fucking go deep. Like, Star Wars isn't a very deep story. Like, it isn't. Like, as much as we like it, the story itself is not that deep. And I don't know why they're pretending as though it is, right? Like, that's the thing that kills me about the recent Star Wars stuff, is that they're pretending as though it's actually a deep story. It's not, right? It's not a deep story. It's just, like, literally, I have magic powers and I'm going to go fight evil. Like, that's the story of Star Wars. And we love it. We love it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that story. Tell that story, but tell that story, goddammit. Ugh. Oh, yeah, of course, you guys have been talking this whole time, and I'm just like... The thing I was pissed at Dread 2012 was... Dread 2012 was good, though. You know what? And you know what was good about Dread 2012 is that it was a very straightforward, well-told story. Exactly what I'm talking about. Dredd is who he is, right? He's Judge Dredd. He's this cop who lives in this, like, post-apocalyptic society. And instead of it being this, like, great fight against the god of evil himself and during the apocalypse and all this kind of nonsense, it's literally him taking down one drug lord, right? Who's taken over one of the buildings. So the story itself is incredibly narrow in its focus, and it's just about Judge Dredd walking up a building, killing people. That's Judge Dredd. He literally walks up a building floor by floor and kills a bunch of people. And it's great. It was beautifully shot. The characterization of Dredd himself was really good. They didn't go very deep into, like, the characterization of any of the characters or anything because they didn't need to. And some of the shots are really quite beautiful, in fact. Like, I thought that they really pushed all their chips into making a really interesting set of paintings, right? Like that the drug itself really let everything get beautiful. The slow-mo shit. I love slow motion stuff, guys. Can I just tell you, I just need to pause for a second and just say this. I could literally watch, like, an apple explode. Like, put a firecracker inside of an apple and have it explode in super slow motion. Like, so slow that you don't think it's actually moving. I want to see it so slow that I can literally feel my bones grinding. Like, I want slow motion. I've never seen anybody do this in film. And right now, we've got the technology to be able to do it. I want to see slow, like, I want it so slow that people walk out of the theater. Like, that's how fucking slow I want it. I want to just sit there and bask in, like, the step-by-step process of this apple just steadily blowing apart. Or if you want it to be more narrative-based, right, you could have, like, a zooming out. So you're zooming out of, let's say you have your apple that's exploding, right? So you have this zooming out. And as you're zooming out, slowly, as this slow motion apple is blowing up, there's a larger story that's unfolding around the apple itself that is itself quite riveting. So maybe someone is punching someone else or something. But it's like a big, like, and literally something that you would set up that if you watched it all happen all at once, it would take like 5 seconds. And what I'm talking about is literally sitting down for 2 hours and watching that 5-second moment unfold for 2 hours straight in slow motion. And I would watch it. I think that shit is interesting. That's what I would like to see, because it gives the storyteller the opportunity to thwart conventional storytelling while simultaneously rooting everything in the truth of storytelling. That good stories aren't like, there aren't like big twists and riveting all this and all, like most stories you see are extremely straightforward, right? They are usually very straightforward. But we love them. We love them, right? Like you're telling me like Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian is as straightforward as a story that can get. We love it. Star Wars, the original trilogy, is as straightforward as a story can be. And we love it, right? Like and somewhere along the line, Disney has kind of forgotten that that's the case. But Judge Dredd didn't. It really knew it. It was just like Judge Dredd. He goes to a place, he climbs up a tower, he kills a bunch of bad guys, he gets rid of the bad guy, moves on with his life. Blade Runner is awesome, but I would rewatch 2049 before I rewatch Blade Runner for a 200th time. The Mr. Krabs school of filmmaking. Disney screws over the workers all the time. Yeah, of course they are. They're a big giant conglomeration at this point, right? They're a big giant conglomeration at this point. They're not really that invested in the story anymore, which is what drives me crazy. And I keep saying it over and over again. People keep going to see these films that they know they're going to hate. Like, they know they're going to hate these films. You know you're going to not like them. Like, you know. But you go anyway. Stop. That if Disney started experiencing some flops, if they started to release some of this garbage schlock, and people just stopped going because they were like, yeah, it's garbage, right? I'm not going for a bad time. But the truth is that like most people when they go to film will accept a shitty story and shitty characterization and shitty acting because the special effects are pretty, right? That by and large we are just watching moving paintings, right? And that is where they're putting their money. And so I don't know, I get it. Like it's just like, oh yeah, okay. Like the new Aladdin. The new Aladdin is exactly what I love to talk about because it was so obviously phoned in. The whole movie was so completely phoned in by the actors, by the director, by everybody. Fucking Will Smith might as well have. Like, you could see that someone like Will Smith was like showing up on set and he'd be on his phone and he'd be like going on his thing and he'd be responding to people and talking to people or maybe talking to his agent, all that kind of stuff. And then they'd be like, hey, Will, we're ready. And he'd be like, oh, okay. And he'd like put his phone away. And be like, ha ha, yeah, whoa. Cut. Okay, good, yeah. Like you could see it. You could see how disinterested everybody was. You could see how bored everybody was. And like they didn't hire choreographic. They didn't hire choreographic or whatever. They didn't hire people to do choreograph. I am struggling with that word. Choreography. They didn't hire choreography. Like, they didn't hire people. Like, sure, they probably hired somebody, but they have Jackie Chan's phone number, right? Like, they have this guy's phone number, right? Like, they could call somebody. And the casting of Will Smith itself is, like, as cynical as it gets. Like, Will Smith? Really? That's your guy? That's the guy. Like, when you think wacky, zany, high-energy performer, your initial thought, Will Smith. I think Kevin Hart would have been a better cast. Don't you? Don't you think that Kevin Hart would have been a better cast? But like, they didn't care. They didn't care. They knew that people were going to come see the film. It cost them $180 million to make that film, and the film made $1 billion. Like, why should they care? Why should they put the effort in? Why should they give a shit at all to tell any story that's reasonable to tell if that's the formula? I spend $100 million, I get $1 billion. Like, why should I bother? What's hilarious is that Matt Stone and Trey Parker actually bought Casa Bonita from their famous South Park episode. That's great. And then sounds like a breathless storytelling of a 6-year-old when they come in to get a drink. Yeah, that's exactly right. Right? He's like walking around being like, yeah, I found a really pretty rock, and then I went and I took up a stick, and then I threw the rock at the stick, and then the stick fell over, and so I went and got the stick back, and then I got thirsty, and so I came in. Yeah, capitalism has reached its logical end. It cannot offer new innovation because it's cannibalizing itself because the innovation is the elimination of capital. That if it wanted to actually innovate, it would have to get rid of itself. Fifth Element. You are on the money, Bumbleguppy. Fifth Element was a great sci-fi film. And you know what? If you break down Fifth Element into its story elements, you realize pretty quickly that Fifth Element is a phenomenal sci-fi film because the story itself is so simple. It's so straightforward. Like, what's the story of the Fifth Element, right? The story of the Fifth Element is that Bruce Willis, right, is being sent on a mission to get this stone so that they can put it in a place to defeat like this evil that's coming. And along the way, he hooks up with Lilu, who is like the advocate for this elder race. That's your whole fucking story, right? And scene by scene as you go along, it's just a constant kind of movement towards that endeavor. Fifth Element has, but so because the story is so clean, because it's so straightforward, it really frees them up, the storytellers, to focus on a scene-by-scene basis. And every scene in Fifth Element is a work of art in and of itself. Every scene in the Fifth Element is just a beautifully told vignette and a beautiful painting that fuels the characterization of Dallas Corbin, that fuels the characterization of the world itself, and imagines a future that is strange and unusual, but also believable and seems realistic at the same time. And the infusion of magic with sci-fi absolutely elevates the Fifth Element to one of the best sci-fi films ever put to film. And it really came out of left field. Like, nobody saw that shit coming. Everybody was just like, what? And while simultaneously also being a heavy critique against capital, right? That capitalism doesn't come out looking too good in Fifth Element. And as they glance off of it, of course. But, and like the introduction of, what's his name? Ruby Rose, like the player, the guy played by Chris Tucker, right? And it's just like this constant introduction of like really amazing, hilarious, or excellent scenes that build to be this truly epic story that fundamentally is about love, right? That it's about, finally in the end, it is about Lilu needing to discover the power of love. And that's just beautiful. It's just beautiful, right? And, I had one other thing to say about Fifth Element because I really love Fifth Element. Fifth Element is like absolutely one of my favorite films because the storytelling is so clean, the characters are so strong, there's no bullshit. Like there's no waste. There's no waste. They've cut everything off the bones. There isn't a single scene in Fifth Element where you're like, we could do away with that. Oh, it's and the Zog, the villain Zog and Dallas Corbin never meet. And it was completely intentionally done that these two never actually confront one another, right? Because one of the themes within the story of the Fifth Element has to be that good and evil don't always come and confront one another, that the agents of good and the agents of evil operate within their own spheres and independently of one another and unbeknownst to one another. Like Dallas Corbin and Zog don't even know each other. They didn't even know each other, right? That they were just the agents of the forces of good and the forces of evil, and that ultimately the forces of good will prevail. Right? Great story, man. I love Fifth Element. And like, has there been a film made since The Fifth Element that took that had such immense creativity scene by scene? Like in the fashion, in the like the idea that there's even this priest in a sci-fi movie, but the fashion, the aliens themselves, the weaponry, the special effects, and then like goofy moments where like Dallas is like begging this guy, hey, send the gun over my way, and the guy's an idiot, so he like sends him some stupid balls or something, like, and just constantly every scene is just loaded with creativity, and the sets are gorgeous, and just everything is so and then suddenly there's like an opera piece in the middle of it. Suddenly you're listening to a piece of like alien opera, and you're just like, this is fucking great, you know? And so it was just like a variety show that took you to the moon and back. I loved it. Fifth Element was great. And what was great about the antagonist of the Fifth Element is that it was very clear that it was just evil, right? Like, my critique of Blade Runner is that here's a dude who is motivated by nothing. He's just evil, right? I am an evil man because I'm evil. But that's because he's a man and he needs to be motivated by something. But if your primary antagonist is essentially like the force of chaos and evil itself, yeah, I can get on board with that, right? Throw the ring into Mordor, man. Like, let's go. He's evil because he's fucking evil and he is the force of evil. I'm like, okay. Let's ride. You know what, man? The Notebook is good. It is good. I hate The Notebook just because I saw it when I was in my like early 20s, and my sister and all her friends were just gaga over this film. And so I hate it from that element. From a storytelling element, The Notebook is effective. It's good. Oops. I'm so glad that this Friday evening I get to talk about movies. We have a defender of 2049. It had Ghost in the Shell themes, surveillance themes, deep space themes, predations of capitalism, cyber sex, and pornography. What is awesome is none are fully explored, but just presented. You should rewatch it. Harrison Ford reappears as Rick Deckard later in the movie. The 2049 villain is actually the super hot blonde in a way. All right, Victini, you know what? I'll take it. I'll listen to that. I always like encountering people who like actually really like something that I didn't like, because I can be convinced. Hey everyone, I was right to make popcorn for today's stream. Yeah. Movie going as an expression of consumer capitalist condition. That's exactly what it is, Bumbleguppy. And that's certainly what I'm going to say, right? Movie going is an expression of consumer capitalist conditioning. I need to write that down. Just so if anybody says to me, like, John, you're just talking about movies and shit, I'll be like, yeah, well, movie going is an expression of consumer capitalist conditioning. So, but it is true. Like, it is true. Like, if everybody just stopped going to see these dumb films, they would change, right? Like, and these films are dumb. Like, they're universally dumb. Has anybody gone to see a film in theater recently that they walked out being like, that was a good film, right? Like, I feel like most films we go to see these days, we just kind of accept that they're going to be dumb. We just sort of accept that they're going to be bad. That we just want for 2 hours to dwell in the, like, key dangling. Ugh. Have you ever watched Movie Pitch? Yeah. You're right on the money, guy. That guy, the Movie Pitch guy. If you guys don't know, I might as well. This guy's great. He's absolutely deserving of all the accolades. Movie Pitch. Yeah, this guy here. Yeah, what the hell?
So, you have a new Marvel...
Yeah, if you don't want to get spoiled on this particular one, it's about 8 minutes long, but if you watch one of these, you've seen kind of all of them, but there's something nice about the way he does things. I'm for sure going to show this, because this guy nails it. This comes from Screen Rant. You can find it with Pitch Meeting or Super Easy, Barely an Inconvenience will get you there. But for sure, let's watch this guy. He's brilliant.
So, you have a new Marvel movie for me?
Yes, sir, I do. And I figure this could be our first foray into the world of martial arts, other than that Iron Fist show we did.
That never happened.
No, it did. I remember with that guy from Game of Thrones?
No, we never did that.
So what's the movie?
Well, sir, I figure we could do a movie about Shang-Chi and the legend of the 10 bracelets.
Isn't it 10 rings?
Yeah, but I thought it could look cool if they were worn around the wrists, and I think at a certain point a ring becomes a bracelet, scientifically speaking.
No, I think at a certain point a bracelet becomes a ring, but then if a ring expands, it's always a ring.
That sounds like it makes sense. Okay, 10 rings it is.
Amazing. So what happens in the movie?
Well, we're gonna meet Shang-Chi, right? But he calls himself Sean, and he lives in San Francisco.
Okay.
And he's friends with this girl named Katie, and they work as valets together.
How do we know they're best friends?
Because one of her first lines is, "We've been friends for 10 years.
Oh, best friends love stating how long you've been best friends with them.
Yeah, they do.
So they're in love, I imagine? I mean, one's a boy and one's a girl.
No, they're just friends. Okay, so anyway, one day they're taking the bus together and Shang-Chi gets attacked by a bunch of assassins.
Oh no.
Yeah, so he's gonna suddenly reveal that he's like an insanely good martial artist and he's gonna have this incredible fight scene with them on this bus.
Yeah, he's fighting some bad guys on a bus?
Yeah, they're like doing martial arts and he's using the environment, he uses his jacket at a certain point.
Oh, a relatively grounded, well-choreographed fight scene? That's actually refreshing.
And the bus's brakes get cut and Katie has to drive the bus and Shang-Chi dives and the bus gets cut in half.
Oh, there's the Marvel over-the-topness. Okay, gotcha.
So Katie's like, "Hey, what's up with you secretly being a martial arts master?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm secretly a martial arts master, and I gotta go see my sister now."
Oh, he does?
Yeah, see, he got this postcard that he thinks is from her, so he needs to fly to China because he thinks she's in danger too.
Gotcha.
So he's like, "Bye, Katie, I gotta go." And Katie's like, "No, I'm coming with you."
Oh, best friends love coming on dangerous adventures with you off of little to no information.
Yeah, they do.
So wait, why is Katie going?
So we can have some comic relief around that people can explain things to.
Oh, very helpful.
Yeah.
And so what happens when they get there?
Well, we're gonna meet Shang-Chi's sister, Xialing.
And what's her deal?
Well, after their mom died, their father, Wen Wu, put Shang-Chi through torturous, brutal training for years, right?
That's terrible.
Yeah, but she wasn't allowed to train with the men, so, it was pretty unfair to her.
Yeah, I mean, what a jerk of a father. How come she doesn't get the brutal torture? Oh, wait, I don't know how I feel about this morally.
So since she couldn't train with them, she watched them and taught herself how to be even better than them.
But how could she learn, like, the grabbing moves and stuff? Wouldn't she need people to practice with?
No, not even.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, it turns out that Shang-Chi receiving a postcard was actually a setup by his father, and he has them both captured.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so they head to his place because he wanted to basically reunite the family, and he thinks he knows how to bring their mom back from the dead using these pendants and a map and stuff.
So why did he send assassins after them?
Oh, well, he says he knew they wouldn't be able to kill his children.
So then why try?
So we can have some fight scenes in the movie.
That's a good point. So what's this guy's deal anyway?
Oh, well, he's 4,000 years old.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and he has these 10 rings, and he leads a group called the 10 Rings.
So what do these rings do exactly?
Oh, all kinds of stuff, sir. They make you immortal, also other things involving energy or something.
Oh, that's pretty vague, man.
Yeah, this way they can do whatever I want them to do from scene to scene.
Smart.
And so he's actually the real Mandarin, and that Trevor Slattery guy from Iron Man 3, that was his doing.
Oh man, I
love that we can retroactively make our unpopular decisions seem calculated and deliberate and important. It is pretty sweet that we can do that, sir. And so what are we saying the Ten Rings organization does exactly? Oh, they've been doing stuff for thousands of years, so immense you can't possibly fathom it, but also vague enough that you probably wouldn't have heard of it. Gotcha. God, how many underground organizations that secretly control everything are there in the MCU at this point? Thousands. Wow, yeah, maybe we should find a new thing. No. Okay. Anyway, so Wenwu explains that he's been getting these messages from their mother from the grave, and Shang-Chi's like, Dad, she's gone. You sound crazy. He doesn't believe that his father may have stumbled upon something crazy like that. No, sir. He's like, there's no way. You sound insane, Papa. He doesn't think that his 4,000-year-old immortal father could have possibly stumbled upon something in this vein. Doesn't even entertain the idea, and he's right. Oh, okay, great. So anyway, all the good characters get put in a cell because they don't want to cooperate. Oh man, it's gonna be hard to get out of there. Actually, it's gonna be super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Oh, really? Yeah, see, Xiaoling had already escaped from there, and they're left unguarded, and Trevor Slattery is down there, and he can help them escape. Oh, wow, that is convenient. It is, and Trevor has this little furry mythical creature friend that makes little squeaking noises that only he can understand. How? Unclear. Okay, that's kind of weird, but I guess it could be fun if it's just a couple of, playful, semi-understanding back and forth. The creature's gonna give precise driving directions that are crucial to the plot. Oh, it is, okay. You see, they need to go to this place called Talo, where their mom is from, but they need to drive through a mythical forest to get there. In a beautiful BMW. Okay, seems like you're probably getting a lot of money to specify that, so they get to this place and they find out that Wenwu's plan is actually really, really bad. Oh, it is? You see, this big friggin' soul-sucking demon called Dweller in Darkness is pretending to be their mom to trick Wenwu into releasing him. Oh, soul-sucking demons are tight. What? No, they're not. You're right, I don't know what possessed me to say that. Anyway, so then Katie's gonna do a couple of hours of archery. Oh, that's nice. Just for fun or for the story? It's so she can have something to do in the third act. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, everything's been pretty much explained now, so at this point in a story, this kind of character either dies or picks up a new skill for the third act. That makes sense. So then there's gonna be this big fight between the people of Talo and the Ten Rings, with color-coordinated weaponry. Of course, blue versus red. Fantastic. And meanwhile, Wenwu's gonna start punching this wall to try to release his dead wife, but he's actually releasing these tiny little soul-sucking demons. Oh no. Yeah, so then all the human characters need to join forces and fight. An army of soulless CGI enemies that the characters can violently kill without the audience feeling weird about it. Exactly. Wow, 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 wow. And then Shang-Chi has to fight his father. Oh wow, a grounded fight with very personal stakes? That's actually a nice change of... And they shoot colored energy blasts at each other, and a giant demon pops out, and a giant dragon pops out and fights it too. Oh, there's the Marvel over-the-topness. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and so Wenwu dies, and then the next 10 minutes are gonna be just whatever the computer is able to render. Oh, they can render a whole visual mess of craziness. Can it be super colorful, but also somehow entirely gray? You know it. Amazing. And so then Shang-Chi manages to kill the demon with the 10 rings and save the day. So what are the 10 rings exactly? Do we find out? Oh, stay tuned. Oh? Yeah, we're gonna have a post-credit scene where it's like, oh, these are probably made out of something that's gonna be important eventually. Stay tuned. Nice. No better way to end a Marvel movie than with a commercial for future projects, and that should about do it, actually. What is that? That's just the Marvel movie checklist? There's a checklist? Of course there's a checklist, and you've done great, my friend. Big messy CGI battle in the third act, secret evil organization, color-coded energy blasts. We got cameos from other Marvel movies. Trevor Slattery, Wong, and Abomination. Does the main character remove his shirt to reveal a six-pack at a certain point? He does, yeah, great physique. Well, fantastic. If we could just add a tease that another Marvel character is off doing something important, that'd be great too. On it.
This guy's great. This guy's great, man. The format that he's chosen is so great. His storytelling is always very crisp and rooted and very critical of how these movies get made, and he's always on the money, man. High advertisement for this guy. Absolutely. Rob Schneider is the stapler. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good pitch there from Aga. I'm happy to move forward on that. Total Recall or The Running Man, yeah, not bad side. The 80s versions of those. The 80s versions of those. Fuck the remakes. Fuck the remakes. I don't think anything can beat the Emperor from Star Wars. So it's treason then. My little green friend. Yeah, Joker was good. I actually recommend Summer of '84, pretty good film. Not sure if you're into horror films, John. Oh yeah, I remember The Burbs. I saw The Burbs when I was very young, though, so I don't really remember it. As an old guy, I recommend The Last Starfighter. It's a slice of the 80s. Absolutely. Honestly, the 80s had some of the best films because it was so, like, it was this time when you could just kind of make whatever, right? Like, there wasn't any, because they didn't have, like, the high special effects, but they obviously saw that special effects were coming, and so, like, they kept kind of going down this path. But, like, you could have, like, very oddball story scripts and, like, oddball sort of stuff that people, like, and you think about a film like Home Alone even, right? Something as boring and mundane as that we would consider sort of boring and mundane as Home Alone. But, like, that's a very odd script to see and then to actually think, let's make a film out of this, right? Let's make a film out about a kid that's left home alone, and then there's these home invaders, and he sets up a series of traps and all this. Yeah, but an 80s movies 100% stand up, man. They 100% stand up. Which is why I think that, like, when they did a reboot of Ghostbusters, right? I actually thought the reboot of Ghostbusters was fairly reasonable, right? Like, it's not like Ghostbusters is, like, the greatest film that was ever made, right? And, but there was, like, a lot of outrage, and everybody kind of tried to say that most of that outrage was coming because they were women. But I think that if they had made that movie and they had to use different actors, it would have not gone over so well, because it's like trying to remake The Princess Bride. Like, they just got it right. They told the story. It was really good. We liked it. Don't mess with it. Like, don't mess with that. Like, it's good. And so when it gets remade, it's so obviously cynical. It's so obviously... I am not the biggest, like, I don't seek out horror. I'll put it that way. Like, if somebody is with me and they're like, hey, let's go watch a horror film, I'll be like, yeah, okay, cool. I don't really seek out horror because I find that lots of horror ends up just kind of being either gruesome, right? So they're just trying to, like, disgust you. They're just trying to hit you in that space of disgust, or very jump scare focused, where it's like, big swelling moment, jump scare, and the horror that I really respect ends up being psychological horror. The horror that I've seen that I really like is there's a French series called Marianne. I highly advise seeking this out. Marianne was very effective, and then the Fourth Encounter, which is actually an alien flick, but it ends up being kind of a horror flick as well. And that's very effectively. Yeah, Saw. Saw is not, like, that's not even horror, right? It's just porn. It's just torture porn. It's literally, like, take somebody, put them in a weird situation, and watch them suffer. Like, it's just uncomfortable. Like, it's just like, you know? And I'm like, why do I want to spend money or time to be like, for that period of time? And there's no, like, there isn't really, like, a character. There isn't really, like, anything. Like, there's no growth or anything. Like, it's just gross, you know? And also part of the problem that I have with a lot of horror is that because my background is film and television, right? Film, television, and theater, I know a little bit too much. You know what I mean? Like, I know how the sausage is made. So, like, I see a scene... This happens all the time in horror, where I'll be, like, watching a horror film, and everyone around me is like, or I'm literally just like, what, that's chocolate sauce. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, I've just been on a set, and I've seen somebody, like, in a contraption like that. And they're, like, in the contraption, right? The contraption is around them or whatever. And they're sitting there, and the director's talking to them, and they're like, yeah. And then and then you want me to like this way? You want me to do this? Like, fall over that way? Okay. Great. And action. I've seen it. Right? I've seen it. So it's just like, it kind of ruins it for me a little bit. I can't like sit down and watch like a horror movie and like really detach myself from the lead up to the scene, you know? I don't really buy in very often. Oh, Willow. You want to talk about excellently told stories. You want to talk about stories that are just absolutely beautiful from the beginning to the end. You are talking about Willow. What an absolutely brilliant film this was. And also, I say this retrospectively because when I was younger I didn't really realize it, but a very bold decision to actually cast a little person. What's the appropriate way to refer to the, like, we used to be able to say midget, now it's little person, and I don't know, now I'm just kind of like, he's a short dude, he's the short dude, right? But to actually cast him as the protagonist of this film, I thought was really, really bold of them to do. And it really made the film much more successful than I think it would have been otherwise if they had have tried to do some kind of cop-out or something. And Val Kilmer is brilliant in it and all of this kind of stuff. And it is very much just like it is essentially a riff on The Hobbit, where, like, you know, a group of, like, what are they even called? But they're just like hobbits, basically, are living in the Shire, and then there's some kind of large existential demonic threat, and this guy goes on a quest to defeat it, and then does, right? But it's so, it's just so good. It's just so excellent. Man, it's been a long time since I've actually watched this movie. A few years ago, he was in an episode of Doctor Who. That was cool, yeah. Some people say they love it more than Lord of the Rings in terms of adventure. I think that that's just the nostalgia coming on. I think that that's just nostalgia. But I actually see where you're coming from with that too, Crouching, though. Because, like, Lord of the Rings... I think if Lord of the Rings was made now, even... I don't want to say it suffers, but it definitely has that kind of, like, it's got to be entrenched in a gritty realism, right? Like that, like there was this period of filmmaking throughout, like the 2010s that was like, well, and like Batman, the Batman trilogy. The Batman trilogy is like really indicative of this idea of like entrenched gritty reality. Everything's gotta be gritty and real, and I'm Batman, and oh. And I think Lord of the Rings has a degree of that there is this idea that like it needs to be this dark, gritty reality, and it's just like, but Lord of the Rings was always an adventure film, and I do think that if they have started, hello? Uh-oh. Hold on. What just happened? My monitor is shut off. Everything looks good. That's really strange. Did my monitor just literally shut off? You guys still there? Let me know if you guys are still there or not. Am I still connected? What happened? Ah, well. Uh-oh. Yeah, okay. Technical difficulties. Technical difficulties. What can you do? Yeah. That was very weird. It was like there was like a sudden snap out of power, but it didn't affect the computer or the internet. It just kind of blinked out my monitor. Okay. Technology. Well, this has been a fun one. We're just talking about movies and shit. Willow 2, eh? I don't know, man. They should just do like I'm a big fan of re-releases. I think that they should just like, hey, let's celebrate yeah, it was like a brownout. Yeah, Silverlight. That's exactly it. I think that we should do we should, as a culture, go be if you want to celebrate a film that you really liked, we should do re-releases. Fuck this like remake shit. Like fuck that remake shit. I find that remakes are like the biggest insult ever, right? You're basically saying, "Oh, that film that we really liked back then isn't good enough, so we're going to do it again." And I'm like, "Fuck that. We have it on film. Do a re-release." Right? Do a re-release. Take Willow, advertise it, so like be a 30th anniversary, right? Release it in theaters again. I think people would go for it, man. I think people would go for it. I don't buy into this. Like why? And from an economic standpoint, why go through the like whole hullabaloo of remaking a film when you could just like re-release it? And I think I think you'd probably make more money doing it that way. And can anybody think of a remake that was actually successful, that they actually liked? Is there a remake that actually got made that was actually better than the original? I'm blanking. Like the RoboCop remake was worse than the original. All of the Disney remakes have been worse. I can't think of a single remake that I've looked at and been like, yeah, they did it. They did it. What if it was a sequel though? I mean, a sequel is a sequel. But like, I don't know. But the remakes are always, they seem to be always worse. Well, we are coming on. Yeah, good question. Like, for some reason, I do think that I have one. There's one that's kind of banging around in my head, but I can't think about what it is. Anyway. Well, is there anything else for us? I hope you guys have good plans for the weekend. I am, of course, unfortunately working through the weekend. The Thing. Yeah, you literally got to go back to like the 1930s and 40s to find some old like black and white stuff that they remake in color. Why in the age of supercomputers and smart robotics do we need to work 60 hours a week just so we don't starve and freeze to death? Surely we've reached the point where any scarcity left is intentionally created by those hoarding all the wealth. How is this not the standard view? Right? This final question is really what I think the reason why I wanted to show this one. Because it's like, how is this not the standard view? Like, it's so clear that we are a wealthy society. It's so clear that we have all of the resources we need. And like, it's so clear that there's enough people out there who want things to improve. Like, how is it not the standard view that we've just got a political system that's completely calcified itself into preventing anything? Like, very much how we're talking about like how film and television are constantly in this like self-referentializing like feedback loop where they can't even imagine moving on. They can't do anything new, right? They're just constantly remaking and they're constantly remaking. I think Dune, actually. Dune is like the one exception. That every time they make a new Dune, it seems to be a little bit better. You know? That like everybody seems to agree that Dune is like, no, didn't quite get it. No, didn't quite get it. So I don't know what it is about Dune. And well, but we're at the peak of a lot of things, right? We're at peak oil, right? We've reached our peak capacity for the amount of oil that we can actually produce, that we can actually get. That it's all downhill from here. We have peaked in terms of land exploitation, right? We can't get more farmland. We can't get new land in that regard. We're exploiting all the land that we can. Silverlight, that first Dune was strange. Not sure if too genius for me to understand or not. Well, it was David Lynch, right? And what's funny is that David Lynch himself says that because it was his first like big blockbuster film, right? And he said the experience completely turned him off doing another one. Because he was just like, unlike other films that he had done, and David Lynch is a very influential director, he just felt like he didn't actually have that much control. That in big blockbuster films, you're just kind of, you know, putting together big pieces, but you don't really have that much control of a lot of those pieces. So you can tell your, you know, special effects team to do this, that, and the other thing, but what they produce is what they produce, right? And you're on this like tight deadline at all times, and so you got to sacrifice a lot in order to put your pieces together and get everything done. And the original Dune, I think, ends up just being like a good swing. Like a good swing. This new one looks like they're actually going to hit something interesting. Just the way that they're depicting the Harkonnen alone looks fresh and interesting. So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, what about Dawn of the Dead? Yeah, not better than the original, but still decent. Yeah, yeah. But it is kind of telling that you got to go back to like, oh, we're gonna do a remake of like a 1950s or 1960s film where they had no special effects whatsoever, right? Like that's where you got to go back to in order to find like, you know what, the one thing that they keep like reiterating on and remaking is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I gotta tell you, I love it. I love it. I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because it's a story about brotherhood. You don't see a lot of stories that are about brotherhood. And every time they iterate on it, they add something that makes it interesting, that makes it more interesting. Like the Michael Bay stuff, they iterated on the idea that each of these turtles should look different, right? It was the first time that they actually made them look distinct and individual in their own right. And I thought that was great, and it seems like it's carrying through. I've heard that the newest iteration of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they might actually be getting rid of Michelangelo's nunchucks. Because nunchucks are a stupid weapon that nobody should use. 45 years after the death of Mao Zedong, historians in the capitalist world continue to portray him as a monster. But China's achievements under his leadership tell a completely different story. The life expectancy increased from 36 to 67. China's population doubled in size. Literacy rates increased from 20% to 93%. Universal free education and healthcare established throughout the country. Feudalism dismantled and land distributed to peasantry. Colonizers kicked out. And like, the big thing that everybody tries to nail Mao on is like, oh, well, the famines killed 100 billion people, but like the population doubles in size. Like, what are you talking about? Like, if there was the amount of death that Westerners seem to believe under Mao Zedong, if that actually happened, it would be noticeable. It would be really noticeable. You would be able to tell. It'd be very straightforward. I feel the need to explain something to the generation that does not remember or never saw a world where one person with a high school education could support a family of 5 comfortably. This was real. For millions of U.S. families, it was normal. It was stolen from you. Is Aaron O'Toole actually trying to tell us he cares about climate change? Reminder, in 2020, the Conservative Party voted against recognizing the climate crisis as real. It's the truth. It's the truth. Well, guys, you know what? I think I'm going to... this is the Friday evening one. I think I'm going to roll this to a close 10 minutes early. I'm feeling pretty worn out. This is a nice one, talking about movies and stuff. That's really lovely. But I think I'm going to close it out. Always remember, each and every one of you is a divine being standing in divine energy. These guys will spend hundreds of billions of dollars to convince you something else is going on. Don't let them. Good luck. We're going to need it.